Chapter 348. Turning his head, Wang Ming saw a man in a gray robe with a startling face. It was impossible to tell his age from his face because it was already completely disfigured. Wang Ming analyzed the wound on the man's face and concluded that it was probably a burn caused by a high-density spirit power mass. Furthermore, it was very likely that some kind of curse had been applied to the spirit power mass to make the wound unable to heal forever. It was useless to use any methods to retain one's youthful looks, even plastic surgery. Brother heir, be careful. Audiobook stared warily at the newcomer and secretly cursed that things weren't looking good. He should have thought of this earlier. Since Shuego's sex goal was to ultimately allow Xiao Yunqing to successfully detonate the bomb, it was impossible that they hadn't sent someone to keep an eye on him. Whether it's Xiao Yunqing or those students who you've already sent to the hospital to be quarantined and think they're safe for the time being, they can't escape death. The ugly man smiled sinisterly. Because his face had been destroyed, it was impossible to make out his expression as he spoke. He held a long sword in his hand, the edge of which was a little unusual as it was sawtoothed. The man tapped the long sword against his shoulder with an indifferent expression and a hoarse voice. My lord has been planning this revenge operation for a long time. It can't go wrong. Wang Ming sat cross-legged on the ground without the slightest hint of fear on his face. He simply put the black tech helmet on the ground and looked at the man as he asked, "This is just a grudge between two epic-level killers. These children are innocent, you shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this." The man sneered. From the beginning, this was just pure revenge. When gorgeous itinerant killed my lord's godson back then, he didn't hesitate at all, and his methods were extremely cruel. Gorgeous itinerant thinks that my lord can't do anything to him just because he's retired from the world. That's really ridiculous. Of course, it's not like there's no way for this matter to end peacefully. Speaking up to this point, the man narrowed his eyes. My lord still cherishes our former friendship as fellow disciples. As long as gorgeous itinerant is willing to kowtow in front of my lord's godson, Black Gauze's grave, admit his mistake, and then hand over his peerless killing weapon, my lord can release the power of the fruit in these students with a wave of his hand. Before this, Wang Ming and Audiobook had heard from Wang Ling about the feud between these two epic-level killers. And every time the grudge between these two epic assassins was mentioned, two things would always be mentioned. The first was Taoist Taotia's godson, Black Gauze. The other was gorgeous itinerant's hidden peerless killing weapon. Audiobook, I have a question. Where did you hear about gorgeous itinerant hiding a killer weapon? The man was startled. Isn't that what they say? Wang Ming and Audiobook were stupefied. It turned out that this was just ***King rumor. Audiobook, have you personally seen peerless itinerant use this killer weapon? How? How can peerless wandering itinerant's killing weapon be? It was said that those who saw this great killing weapon were already dead, and their blood flowed all over the ground, unable to stop even if they wanted to. Ling, and Long, and I Ming, the Wang, I can. This enough. To Jude. This operation, this, I said, this enough. This, I said, my. Ming Ming. Ming Ming, of. Zoof. The corner of the man's mouth twitched. You, a golden core cultivator, are the supreme commander of this operation? He's very impressive. Wang Ming couldn't help laughing. Do you know Audiobook? Hearing this name, the man finally turned pale with fright. You're Audiobook. There was no way he didn't know this name, because it was too familiar. In just one short month, he had participated in the operation to capture the old devil, and it was even said that as the commander-in-chief of the operation, he had destroyed Immortal Mansion, the largest dark force in Huaxiao Nation's history, and captured its master alive. That was an itinerant immortal expert. The man took a deep breath, and the serrated longsword in his hand glowed, a ray of sword light reflecting on his face. Then it looks like I'll have to get rid of you both. He was at the nascent soul stage. In his opinion, an ordinary person and a golden core cultivator were no match for him at all. It was impossible to cross the gap between realms. However, before the man made his move, he noticed a very serious problem. As an ordinary person and a golden core stage cultivator, the two of them didn't seem to feel any pressure when facing him. Weren't they a little too calm? Considering that the old devil and the master of Immortal Mansion had both fallen at Audio's hands, the man instantly felt that there was an 80% chance that this was a trap. Maybe these two people were carrying some kind of defensive magic treasure with a backlash attribute. When two people's realms weren't on the same level, the expert usually lost because he or she had underestimated the enemy and thought that they could kill the enemy in one blow. But sometimes, it was precisely this kind of belittling attitude that often led to the opponent falling into their trap. In a situation where they couldn't confirm whether or not the other party was carrying a defensive magic treasure with a backlash attribute, directly attacking the head was the best option. Raising his sword, he turned into a blur on the ground and was so fast that Audio couldn't react at all. Killing intent burst forth. There was no embellishment to this sword, but it was already whistling through the air. The man raised the serrated long sword in his hand and moved gracefully under his grey trench coat as he prepared to cut off Audio's head. Audio's expression finally changed as he sensed the man's killing intent. His first reaction was to pull the long underwear over his head as Wang Ming had told him before. But it was already too late. Just as Audio was about to move, the man's sword had already cut down on his head. Got it. The man sneered in his heart, but the next moment, his expression abruptly changed. Because after the sawtooth longsword cut through Audio's head, there wasn't a drop of blood on it. Audio, who should have been decapitated by the longsword, seemed to have turned into a wisp of sand and directly disappeared into thin air. What the hell? Was this an illusion spell? Doubts surfaced in the man's mind subconsciously. But even if it was an illusion spell, the man didn't dare believe that a golden core cultivator could trick him. Then, in the next second, the scene in front of him changed. Unharmed, Audio reappeared in front of him. On the other side, Wang Ming sat cross-legged on the ground without the slightest hint of fear on his face. He put down the black tech helmet in his hand and looked at the man. This is just a grudge between two epic-level killers. These children are innocent, you shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this. The man, wait a minute. He seemed to have heard this line somewhere before. Furthermore, when he had said this line, this young man in a white coat had indeed put his helmet on the ground. The man remembered this scene very clearly, there was no mistaking it. But, what on earth was going on? Damn it. Feeling that something wasn't right, the man raised his sword again and slashed at Wang Ming this time. Wang Ming's situation was the same as Audio's, there was no blood at all. After being slashed, it only turned into a wisp of sand and quickly dissipated. The man rubbed his eyes. The next moment, he saw Wang Ming reappear and sit cross-legged in front of him. Wang Ming put down the helmet in his hand and looked at the man. This is just a grudge between two epic-level killers. These children are innocent, you shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this. The man's lips instantly twitched. Had he King entered Inception? Chapter 349. On the rooftop, Audio stood on one side with a question mark on his face as he looked at the middle-aged man who was continuously brandishing the sawtooth longsword in the air. Air. Brother Air, what's going on? Wang Ming smiled. The true essence of the brain deduction technique isn't just about deducing things in your head. The most powerful profound meaning was the ability to allow others to enter the space within your mind. It's a little complicated to explain, but I've already trapped him. He thinks he's chopping someone, but in fact, it's just my brain clone that's been chopped to death. Hearing this, Audio was secretly astonished. He had never thought that someone would actually be able to cultivate this technique to this level, which also proved how terrifying Wang Ming's brain was. Now, Audio finally knew why this brother Air could wear this white coat at such a young age. What do we do now? Audio asked as he stared at the middle-aged man who was chopping at the air as if he had gone mad. The man was at the nascent soul stage. Although he was currently trapped in Wang Ming's brain deduction technique, Audio couldn't do anything to him. Even if he sneakily stabbed him in the back with a sword, the damage that a golden core cultivator could do to a nascent soul cultivator was very limited. Thus, using the brain deduction technique to stall for time wasn't a long-term solution. Wang Ming was naturally well aware of this in his heart. Furthermore, when he wasn't wearing a helmet, he only had 50 brain clones. Once the man chopped them all down, this restriction would be lifted. And for a very long time to come, the brain deduction technique would be on cooldown. The biggest limitation of the brain deduction technique was that it couldn't be used on the same person in a short period of time. But Wang Ming had already thought of a way. The ring on his hand flashed with spirit light, and he actually took out a brand new set of red long johns and a very ordinary hemp rope. Zhuo was utterly astonished. He already knew what Wang Ming was going to do. In this situation where he couldn't cause any damage, the surefire way to tie up the enemy was to tie him up for a long time. As long as he used this set of long johns as a sack to wrap this person from head to toe, and then used an ordinary hemp rope to tie him up on the outside of the long johns, it would be like a prison. Even better than the spirit shackles. Brother Air, this is too dangerous, let me do it. Don't mind me. Hiding a few meters behind the man, Wang Ming said, "It wasn't easy for me to get rid of that she-devil outside, so give me a chance to prove myself. And let me tell you, I have a lot of experience doing this kind of thing." Zhuo, have you watched Man vs. Wild? Wang Ming asked. Zhuo, Wang Ming, it's that show where you turn around and everything is protein. For the first time, Zhuo felt like he was a little out of touch with the times. No. In some sense, he was actually older than Wang Ming. This made Zhuo want to cry but have no tears. Sure enough, there was a generation gap every 2 years. Nowadays, the news said that young people in their 20s were already experiencing a midlife crisis. It was not without reason. It's okay if you haven't seen it before. Let me show you. Wang Ming grinned and made a shoot gesture at Zhuo. He had already unbuttoned the collar of the long johns and sneaked around to the man's back, planning to find an opportunity to put it on. Look. There's a lone nascent soul cultivator here. We have Ling Jinren's special long johns and an ordinary thick hemp rope, and we can try to catch him. Wang Ming cautiously stood a few meters behind the man. A nascent soul cultivator can provide us with a lot of protein. Zhuo, but a nascent soul cultivator isn't easy to deal with. We have to approach him slowly from behind and strike while he's down. Although he's currently trapped in my brain deduction technique, we still need to be careful. Zhuo was speechless. Because in the next moment, Wang Ming had taken advantage of the man's breaths to actually pounce on him and accurately put the long johns on him. Using long johns to put someone on, and it really King worked. What are you spacing out for? Come and help. Wang Ming shouted. After a moment of stupefaction, Zhuo hurried over to help, and together with Wang Ming, he directly tied the man up. It wasn't until that moment that the man came back to his senses from Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. What's going on? The man was astonished to find that he had actually been put on long johns, even his legs had been forcibly put on long johns, and his entire body was tightly bound by the hemp rope. He struggled with all his might, blue veins popping out on his neck and spirit light bursting out from all over his body. However, a golden light emerged from the long johns at the same time, and his struggles were like punching cotton or a clay ox in the sea. It was to no avail. How is this possible? The man blurted out. A magic treasure carried by an ordinary person could actually trap him? More importantly, this was just a set of long johns that couldn't be more ordinary, and could be found everywhere on the market. What kind of magic weapon is this? The man was utterly astonished and had an incredulous expression on his face. Combined with his already disfigured face, it made the whole scene look especially frightening. Wang Ming half-crouched in front of the man and patted him on the shoulder. Stop struggling. These long johns may look a little crude, but even an itinerant immortal might not be able to escape. The man from Shuego sect smiled miserably, and there was suddenly some despair on his face. When he had heard Zhuo's name earlier, the man had actually already been on guard, but in the end, he had still fallen for it. This ordinary person who didn't have a trace of spirit energy on him wasn't ordinary at all. Thinking of how he had been trapped by the brain deduction technique, the man raised his terrifying face and glared at Wang Ming. You noticed me from the beginning? To be precise, it should have been at the beginning of the barrier. My 50 brain clones were already on the move. Actually, I knew Xiao Yinxing's position from the beginning, and I also knew of your existence. Wang Ming crossed his arms and shrugged as he said indifferently, I just put on this show to lure you out. Wang Ming's tone was a little playful as he said this, and there was even that trademark naughty smile on his face, which was the complete opposite of Wang Ling's poker face from beginning to end. However, the deterrent effect was still very strong. If it was said that Wang Ling's intimidating power was the suppression of his aura from beginning to end, then Wang Ming's intimidating power was the fear of being toyed with in the palm of his hand. The man was secretly alarmed. He hadn't expected Wang Ming to have actually planned this far. This time, the man finally looked Wang Ming in the eye and started to size up the white coat Wang Ming was wearing. In the end, his gaze fell on the metal on it. Then, he suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened. But before he could say anything, Wang Ming had already pointed the heavenly materials sword at the man's throat. Speak, your Shuego sect's real objective. According to the information I have, your Shuego sect's actions aren't as simple as just revenge, right? The man narrowed his eyes at Wang Ming. What are you looking at? Hurry up and speak. Wang Ming frowned and complained, I'm just an ordinary person. Carrying this sword is like carrying a dumbbell, it's very tiring. The man, Audiobook. Chapter 350. In that moment, the man deeply felt like he had been deceived. The young man in the white coat standing in front of him was clearly just an ordinary person. But the man felt that this was a lot more troublesome than many cultivators of the same realm. It was actually quite hard to put into words this strong sense of disparity after being defeated. It was like meeting an online friend. She was clearly a pure and cute girl online, but in the end, she turned out to be a fat tiger in real life. With Wang Ming's sword at his throat, the man once again tried to struggle free of the long johns and hemp rope, but failed. The hemp rope was just an ordinary rope, but the long johns inside weren't ordinary, as they completely blocked off his spirit energy like a membrane. Don't struggle, these long johns are specially made to catch people. They're the same style as what we're wearing, but they're different. Wang Ming smiled. Tell me, your real purpose. The man lowered his head and gritted his teeth, but didn't answer. Wang Ming smirked and poured the spirit energy stored in the ring into the heavenly materials sword, then gently cut open a small wound on the man's neck. On the side, Audiobook couldn't help but marvel at the material of the heavenly materials sword. The sword which the master of Immortal Mansion had forged was really too monstrous. Although it didn't have a sword spirit, the sword chi lingering around it was really frightening. After pouring spirit energy into it, even an ordinary person could easily cut open a nascent soul cultivator's body. Wang Ming's move was a small show of force. At first, the man didn't think much of it, but his expression quickly turned uneasy. Because he sensed evil sword chi pouring into his body and eroding his spirit energy bit by bit, this sword actually had the effect of sealing a spirit. Wang Ming kept that smirk on his face as he said again, do you understand now? As long as I have this sword, I can effortlessly destroy all your plans. This sword has the effect of swallowing spirit energy. This small wound is just a warning. If I slash you once, you'll probably be bedridden for several years. Wang Ming's words were actually half true. Back when Fang Xing had been stabbed in the middle of a fierce battle, the effect of sealing his spirit had actually only lasted for 3 to 5 days. When the sword chi had swallowed up all the spirit energy in his body, the sword chi generated by the heavenly materials sword would naturally circulate in his body and then gradually disappear. Of course, Audiobook also knew about this. So when he heard Wang Ming's words, Audiobook couldn't help sighing in his heart. With this kind of acting skills, it would really be a pity if he didn't go on the show Eggs of Actors. The man's disfigured face became even uglier. It seems like my guess is correct. You guys really do have secrets. Wang Ming stared fixedly at the man. I'll ask you one last time. Tell me everything you know. After about 2 or 3 minutes of silence, the man lowered his head and sighed. I am Cho Shirsi of Shuego sect. Wang Ming, TCH, who asked for your name? I just want to know what happened. Cho Shirsi chuckled. Of course, I have my reasons for telling you my name. In our Shuego sect, there's no distinction between realms. The uglier you are, the higher your status is. My name is Cho Shirsi, which makes me the 14th ugliest person in the sect. Wang Ming and Audiobook were stunned when they heard this. Cho Shirsi's disfigured face was already completely unrecognizable, even his nose and eyes were a mess, yet he was only ranked 14th, then how ugly was the first? Cho Shirsi chuckled. So, if you want to ask me about what happened, I actually don't know much. Even if you take me back and forcibly search my memories, it's no use, the real core secrets are in the hands of the higher-ups. At the very least, only the top 3 know the complete plan. Is Cho E Taoist Taotai? Audiobook asked curiously. Not really. The man shook his head. My lord's ugliness can no longer be described with words. He's truly hideous beyond compare, even we feel disgusted when we see his true face. That's why my lord always wears a mask. Wang Ming and Audiobook, taking a deep breath, Audiobook continued to ask, second question, isn't your sect called Guogwa sect? Why do you call it Shuego sect as well? At first, it was a brother with an accent who called it Shuego sect. Later, our sect felt that it was more domineering, so we simply called it that. Cho Shirsi sighed. When we went out to catch the students, we told them we were from Guogwa sect. At first, they weren't afraid at all, and thought we were all fruit ninjas. We might as well call ourselves Shuego sect. Wang Ming and Audiobook sighed and slowly approached her. Then, tell me everything you know. But just as Audiobook was about to get close, Cho Shirsi suddenly laughed loudly. He opened his mouth, and a silver thread as thin as gossamer spat out. The silver thread abruptly expanded in the air and actually condensed into a small spiral-shaped magic weapon, which ruthlessly crashed into the center of Audiobook's forehead. This was Cho Shirsi's final trump card to protect himself. However, the attack range was very limited, so Cho Shirsi had been waiting for an opportunity, waiting for either of the two to walk within half a meter of him before using it. And within half a meter, this move was a killer move that could kill in one hit. Wang Ming had been more cautious before, but little did he know that during their conversation just now, Audiobook had let his guard down. However, what stupefied Cho Shirsi was that after this spiral-shaped magic weapon hit Audiobook, there was still no blood on his forehead, and it just turned into sand and scattered in the wind. The next moment, he saw Audiobook reappear on the other side, and the scene from before replayed in front of him. Wang Ming reappeared and sat cross-legged in front of him. He put the helmet in his hand on the ground, then looked at Audiobook. I knew you had other tricks up your sleeve. Did you think you had already escaped my brain deduction technique? Cho Shirsi grit his teeth. The next moment, Wang Ming directly stepped forward with his sword and cut a large wound on Cho Shirsi's neck. Ah! The heavenly materials special sword chi entered Cho Shirsi's body, and a burning sensation penetrated through the wound and poured into his body, causing him to cry out in pain. Cho Shirsi fell to the ground in pain, his expression a little desperate. He regretted courting death earlier a little. Now that the sword chi had entered his body, the spirit sealing effect had greatly intensified, and he couldn't release even the slightest bit of spirit energy. Now, even an ordinary person could do whatever they wanted to him. Audiobook picked up the spiral-shaped magic weapon that hadn't hit him yet from the ground. This is one of the top 10 hidden weapons, the gyroscope needle. Audiobook recognized the origin of this small magic weapon. Although it was very small, it wasn't weak at all. The shorter the distance, the more explosive its power. Caught off guard within half a meter, even a soul formation cultivator would fall prey to it. How dare you trick me? The corner of Audiobook's mouth twitched, and he slapped Cho Shirsi in the face. He was very angry. If it hadn't been for Wang Ming, he really would have died just now. His death wasn't a big deal, but he would never see Shifu Wang Ling again. Wang Ming couldn't help laughing at this scene. Now that things have come to this, hitting him is useless. Holding the gyroscope needle, Audiobook looked at Wang Ming. Second brother, do you know what the code word for this gyroscope needle is? Wang Ming, Audiobook, you're asking for it. Wang Ming. Chapter 351. While Wang Ming and Audiobook were still entangled with Cho Shirsi, Wang Ling certainly wasn't idle. Getting Wang Ming to use the heavenly materials sword to save these students was one thing, but mediating the fight between two epic-level killers was Wang Ling's own job. After all, he had received a gift from Killer Taoist back then, and he understood the principle of being shorthand when given. To be honest, Wang Ling actually didn't want to get involved in this matter, but who told him to be unable to control his own hands back then? After learning that Wang Ming and the others had gone to deal with Xiao Yunqing's matter, Wang Ling immediately went to Second Cultivation People's Hospital. If Wang Ling's guess was right, Taoist Tao Tai would definitely make a big move here tonight. This was also in line with Wang Ming's deduction in the car. Xiao Yunqing had only been used to stall for time. A mere student's spirit explosion wasn't enough at all. If the hospital fell into enemy hands and all the students here created a spirit explosion together, more than half of Songhai City would be in trouble. Wang Ling teleported to a park near Second Hospital, and then slowly walked toward its entrance. At that moment, the entrance to Second Hospital's independent ward was already heavily guarded by SWAT officers holding up explosion-proof magic shields. And it wasn't just the entrance, even the nearby streets and even the dark alleys had spotlights and SWAT officers patrolling nearby. Special times called for special treatment. Anyone who was even the slightest bit suspicious would attract attention. Thus, before coming here, Wang Ling had specially asked Immortal Toya to contact Director Li. Just as he reached the entrance, Director Li, who had been waiting outside the hospital for a long time, strode forward. As usual, Director Li was wearing a white coat with the relevant ID hanging around his neck. The first thing he did when he saw Wang Ling was to hand him his work ID and a white coat of the same style. Immortal Toya had asked Director Li to arrange these things for him. From appearance to identity, the one-stop service was completely packaged. Wang Ling looked at the work ID in his hand, which read, Second Cultivation People's Hospital's Independent Ward Psychiatry Department Chief, Wang Hua. The corners of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. Never mind that the name was fake. How had he become the psychiatry department chief? Ling Jinren, please forgive me. One of my colleagues who was transferred previously happened to be in the psychiatry department. Director Li said telepathically in a very low voice, if this identity wasn't arranged like this, it would be easy to see through him. Wang Ling nodded and didn't say anything more. After that, Chief Li took out 2 masks from his pocket. After the two of them put them on, they walked into the hospital naturally. The SWAT officers at the door didn't ask too much, because Director Li and the others already knew each other. When he personally came to receive Wang Ling, the SWAT officers thought that some expert had rushed over from home to the hospital. After receiving the news of the expert consultation, almost all the doctors who returned to the hospital from their homes were personally greeted by Director Li, so the SWAT team did not find anything strange. If there was one, it was that Wang Ling really looked too young. Thus, Wang Ling felt that the masks Director Li had prepared were quite exquisite. Right now, it wasn't just doctors and nurses in Second Hospital, but also many teachers from number 60 high school. If he was recognized here, it would definitely be very troublesome. Tell Ling Jinren about the current situation. As he led Wang Ling to the isolation ward, Director Li gave him a brief rundown of the current situation. All the students who have taken the fruit have been separated into separate rooms according to their schools. After a consultation with the hospital's experts, they were able to develop a preliminary reagent to suppress the production of spirit energy and reduce the concentration of spirit power in the body in a short period of time. But Ling Jinren should have already heard that this reagent can only last until the morning of the day after tomorrow at the most. Speaking up to this point, Director Li couldn't help sighing. To be honest, no one knows what will happen after that. Wang Ling nodded. Although this incident looked very scary and dangerous, the truth was that as long as Taoist Taotai didn't continue to cause trouble and Wang Ming rushed to the hospital with the heavenly materials sword in hand, everything would be over. The scary thing was that Taoist Taotai might come up with something else. Director Li led Wang Ling into the elevator, and he used his work ID to swipe the signal recognition area before he was able to press the button for the floor. This was specially designed to prevent patients with mental problems from escaping. Unless hospital staff swiped their cards, they wouldn't be able to get down at all. Even the fire escape had to be accessed by swiping a card. According to Second Hospital's rules for the allocation of individual wards, the more difficult the illness, the higher the floor they would be assigned. This time, Director Li directly pressed the button for the 30th floor, which was the highest floor in the entire building. All the students who had taken the fruit were sent to the 30th floor. Director Li, currently, some of the students are a little emotionally unstable, so half an hour ago, we applied for assistance from the city police station. Before Ling Zhenren arrived, the first batch of psychiatrists we could contact had already arrived. As he spoke, the elevator doors slowly opened, and Wang Ling saw a familiar figure standing in front of him. It was a tall, thin young man who had just taken a white coat from a nurse and put it on. He grinned at the nurse in front of him. "How are the children now?" The female nurse replied, "There are some who are more difficult to deal with, and we've already handed them over to the chief specialist for guidance. Dr. Song's job is to take care of the children in Ward 12 and 13. I'll have to trouble Dr. Song next." Dr. Song patted his chest confidently. "Okay, no problem, leave it to me." Wang Ling, that familiar back view, that familiar voice, and that iconic big white teeth, as expected, this person was Lai Mengmeng. It was only later that Wang Ling learned that Lai Mengmeng had been personally recommended by his university professor to come here. In university, Lai Mengmeng had studied psychology, and had even treated the old man's illness and counseled him before. The female doctor nodded, a little infected by Lai Mengmeng's sunny nature. "Good luck, Dr. Song. But there's something I don't understand. Why doesn't Dr. Song directly work in psychology?" "Actually, I'm not as good as my teacher says I am. I'm just applying what I've learned in class. Nowadays, if you can't be as good as my Shifu Jiangli, you won't be able to make enough money to live on." Lai Mengmeng smiled at the female nurse. "That's why I became a novel later on. Before entering the profession, I thought that as long as the novel had a few authors whose novels sold well, I would be able to get a share of the profits." The female nurse, "Then, and then?" Lai Mengmeng, "Later, I realized that I didn't even get half a cent." The female nurse, Lai Mengmeng, "But actually, I feel that the job is pretty easy. Although the pay is average, if I take on some more work like this and earn some extra money, it'll be enough." The female nurse, "For example, there's an author on our website who writes books, songs, lyrics, screenplays, comics, and videos. It looks like he's not doing proper work. But the truth is that he's teaching us a profound truth." Chapter 352. Following Director Li's lead, Wang Ling took the fire escape from the 30th floor directly to the rooftop of the hospital. The rooftop was very spacious, and there were many fitness facilities. There was a thick iron fence around the rooftop, which was as tall as several people. This was to prevent patients from jumping off the building. The patients in the hospital usually had 1 to 2 hours to relax on the rooftop. Just a few years ago, there were a few cases of mental patients jumping off buildings during the release period. If this matter had to be traced back to the gate between worlds 6 years ago, there were actually many signs before the gate between worlds descended, such as the abnormal reactions of various animals, but these did not attract people's attention. Ever since the advent of the spirit energy information era, things like natural disasters could be detected a few days in advance using scientific instruments. However, the days before the gate between worlds descended could be said to be completely calm and tranquil. Everything looked too normal. There wasn't even a haze in the sky. Some people found their cats and dogs barking, but in the end, they just beat them up with their slippers. The day before the gate between worlds descended, a few mental patients who were on the rooftop of the second hospital suddenly revealed horrified expressions and started to laugh crazily, just like how it was written in a script. at the same time, all the patients rushed forward crazily. Finally, they rushed out of the rooftop and made a leap of faith. After the incident was over, according to the analysis of some experts, mental patients were much more sensitive to the fluctuations of the gate between worlds than normal people. And it was precisely because of this that these patients on the rooftop had such an extreme reaction. At this point, people completely believed in the old saying, mental patients have a wide range of thinking. It had been a long time since the descent of the gate between worlds 6 years ago. But standing on this rooftop at this moment, Wang Ling still couldn't forget the shock of watching the surveillance footage of this rooftop in the news when he was a child, and how the mental patients had jumped off like crazy. Wang Ling actually felt that this incident had left a huge psychological shadow on him. Of course, having a high realm was one thing, but having a strong spiritual foundation was another. After all, he had only been 10 years old back then, so in various ways, Wang Ling actually quite admired Father and Mother Wang for educating him spiritually. At the age of 16, many people had yet to develop their worldview and were still in the stage of confusion. Xiao Yunsheng, who ate the fruit and thought that he had obtained power, lost himself. This was the best example. He didn't think he was very mature, and sometimes did rather childish things, but he was very proud of one thing: he felt that his 3 views were more upright than many of his peers. Thus, he had always felt that it was unfair to compare him with cultivators who had truly reached the limits of their realms one step at a time. He still had a lot to learn. Father and Mother Wang had given him a good foundation for building up his soul since he was young, and he needed to explore the rest on his own. Some people had lived most of their lives without understanding the meaning and beauty of life. Wang Ling had always felt that there was a meaning to his innate realm, which was something he had always been looking for in his daily life. What is daily life? Wang Ling felt that there was a classic line: perhaps every day we live through is a series of miracles. Well, back to the topic at hand. Director Li naturally had his reasons for bringing Wang Ling to the rooftop. To be honest, when he had stepped into the building, Wang Ling had vaguely sensed some unusual fluctuations, and was very certain that they were coming from the hospital rooftop. Seeing Wang Ling's slightly frown and pensive expression, Director Li nodded. It seems Shifu's judgment is completely correct. When Immortal Toya had arrived at the hospital earlier, he had clearly sensed something unusual, but it hadn't been as precise as Wang Ling's. Someone had already tampered with this place. Wang Ling walked to the center of the rooftop and looked down at his feet. An invisible magic array of unknown function had been set up here, and the technique used was quite brilliant. At the very least, among all the magic arrays Wang Ling had encountered so far, this was one of the top 3. In the history of cultivation, there had been many famous array masters, such as the legendary Immortal Zhenyuan. More recently, Immortal Shipai's array technique was second to none. Wang Ling crouched down and touched the ground. He tried to send spirit energy deep into the ground to disintegrate this array, but failed. The spirit energy was like a clay ox disappearing into the sea, as it didn't have the slightest effect. Breaking an array was like dismantling a bomb. It was a skill. You had to start from the structure of the array itself, decode it, analyze it, and finally break it. You just had to find the core array pattern and destroy it. But the difficulty Wang Ling had now was that this array was invisible and heavily guarded. It wasn't that he couldn't break it, but that it would take some time. Very troublesome. At this point, it would be great if there was an array expert. Wang Ling thought. At the very least, it would save him a lot of trouble. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly heard faint footsteps coming from the corridor behind him. Who was it? Wang Ling turned his head to look. Director Li was startled by Wang Ling's reaction. When he turned his head, he saw a very sunny teenager in sportswear slowly walking over. Director Li instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He had forgotten to lock the door to the rooftop just now, and hadn't expected someone to actually come at this time without him noticing at all. This person's aura was too faint, and completely out of proportion with his sunny appearance, which gave Director Li the feeling that there was something sinister about him to the bone. Who are you? This isn't a place you should be. Director Li stared at the newcomer. Fang Xing emerged from the shadows and raised his hands with a wide smile on his face. Senior Immortal Toya sent me here to take a look at the situation. One of our own? Director Li raised an eyebrow. I'm Fong Xing, I just joined the chat group. Director Li may not have seen me before. Fong Xing gave his trademark smile. Wang Ling felt that the biggest characteristic of Fong Xing's smile was that it looked very sunny. Furthermore, every time he smiled, the curve of his lips was exactly the same. It was hard to tell whether it was a real smile or a fake one. So your brother Fong Xing, Director Li heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Fong Xing's name. Although he had never seen Fong Xing before, he had heard a few things from his Shifu, Immortal Toya. Fong Xing had contributed greatly to the arrest of the Master of Immortal Mansion previously, and was very strong. Of course, that was all Director Li knew. After the Immortal Mansion incident, everyone who had been involved in the matter had agreed to never mention Fong Xing's true identity again. Wang Ling never thought that Fong Xing would actually come here. The one in the mask in front is classmate Wang Ling, right? Fong Xing smiled. This disguise is too bad. Next time, classmate Wang Ling should wear sunglasses, otherwise I'll be able to see through your eyes. Wang Ling, Director Li, Ling Zhenren discovered an invisible array here, but it seems that it's a little troublesome to crack. Since brother Fong Xing is here, how about we help guard Ling Zhenren together? An invisible array? Fong Xing rubbed his chin. I've done some research on arrays, how about I take a look at it? Actually, I'm an array master. Director Li, brother Fong Xing, you've done some research on arrays? Fong Xing grinned. That's right, my dad dabbled in this, so I inherited some of it. Hearing this, Wang Ling abruptly dropped his forehead into his hand as he remembered that Fong Xing was Immortal Shipai's son. If Fong Xing hadn't mentioned it, he would have almost forgotten about it. Previously, he had said that it would be best if an array master came, but he hadn't expected one to actually appear. Chapter 353. At around 10:00 in the evening, while Wang Ling and Fong Xing were dealing with the array, Wang Ming sent word that Xiao Yunqing was under control and that they had arrested a middle-level Shuego sect cadre, Cho Shirsi. After a preliminary interrogation, Cho Shirsi's information was indeed quite limited. But even so, Wang Ling had at least learned something important. Shuego sect's ranking was based on appearance. Wang Ming took a photo of Cho Shirsi and sent it to Wang Ling. In order to make Wang Ling feel less nauseous, Wang Ming had even taken it with a beauty camera, but even with the camera's beauty settings on full display, it still couldn't stop the horrifying feeling this face gave off. Although the middle-aged man who had abducted a young girl in the park was also very ugly, at least his facial features were normal, this Cho Shirsi's facial features were a mess. At the same time, this proved a second thing. The middle-aged man who had been arrested in the park was really just a small fry in Shuego sect. As Fong Xing examined the structure of the invisible array, he glanced out of the corner of his eye at the photo Wang Ming had sent him, and the expression on his face couldn't help twitching uncontrollably. Director Li leaned over to take a look, and was also directly stupefied. Ha ha ha. This person's appearance was really unique. Did Picasso paint his face? Fong Xing, Wang Ling, so the question now was, if Cho Shirsi was already this ugly, then how ugly were the top few contestants in Shuego sect? After learning that Cho Shirsi had revealed Shuego sect's ranking system, this question popped up in almost everyone's mind. As Wang Ling had said, analyzing an array was a technical job. Although it wasn't as if Wang Ling couldn't crack the invisible array under his feet, he actually wasn't proficient in deciphering it. If he had to use the heavenly eye to crack it, that would be like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. When things didn't work out, he would break it down by force. This had been Wang Ling's character since he was a child, and could be seen from when he had broken a big magic sword with his bare hands. As expected, this array is a little troublesome, but it can be completely broken. Fong Xing squatted down and stared at the ground for a good 2 or 3 minutes. Then, he nodded, directly bit his finger, and used his blood as a medium to carve the revealing magic seal on the ground. Wang Ling narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked carefully on the side. Immortal Shipai had been a famous array master back then, and was no longer just an expert, he was at the very least an extraordinary great master. Among the many things Fang Xing had inherited, Wang Ling thought that immortal Shi Pai's notes as an array master should be among them. Those were genuine treasures, and were what all the array masters of today would scramble to get their hands on. If one were to use a phrase to describe it, then that notebook was equivalent to the formation circle. 10,000 peaks. It was very obvious that Fang Xing had inherited immortal Shi Pai's legacy. After all, he was her biological son. Get ready. After carving the revealing magic seal, Fang Xing pushed off the ground with both hands and gave a light shout. Spirit energy poured endlessly from his palms into the ground. In the blink of an eye, the invisible magic array on the ground took on its original form. It was a high-density array set up with crisscrossing runes and had a radius of 6 meters. After it took shape, an illusory shadow in the center of the array pounced at Wang Ling like a vicious beast. This was the array spirit of this magic array. Wang Ling reacted very quickly. He stretched out his hand, and the shadow plunged headfirst into his palm, unable to take another step forward. Then, he squeezed it lightly, and with a bang, the shadow instantly exploded. Director Li on the side was secretly horrified at this scene. This wasn't a weak magic array. Although it couldn't compare to a holy array, it was still one of the best, but this array spirit actually couldn't survive for more than half a second under Wang Ling's attack. Ling Zhenren was really terrifyingly strong. With the array spirit destroyed, the magic array was no longer useful. However, there was still one thing that was unclear, and that was what on earth this magic array was used for. Wang Ling stared at the magic array under his feet, which had completely taken shape, and at the runes that remained on it, deep in thought. If I'm right, this magic array should have a resonance attribute. Fang Xing crouched down and ran his hand over the runes. Resonance arrays usually don't appear on their own, they might be on the roofs of tall buildings near Second Academy. Then what on earth is the purpose of setting up these arrays? Director Li asked curiously. I just checked them carefully, and they should be storage arrays, which can be used to store spirit power on a large scale. Fang Xing narrowed his eyes, and the smile on his face gradually faded as he suddenly became a little serious. He sighed. If I'm right, I'm afraid this is the real reason why Shuego's sect made the students take the spirit fruit this time. If we collect all the spirit power produced by the spirit explosion, it will be very impressive. Director Li's expression changed. What do they need so much spirit power for? Fang Xing stood up, his serious expression relaxing. We won't know until we investigate this matter, but what we can be sure of is that Shuego's sect's motives aren't pure. Wang Ling also stood up and gazed calmly at Fang Xing. He already had an answer in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud. He still needed to catch someone to verify it. Director Li frowned, feeling like he had just learned something incredible. Then what should we do now? Now, we can only rely on Ling Zhenren to keep the students safe. Fang Xing looked up at Wang Ling with a smile on his face. I'm going to patrol the nearby tall buildings and see if there are any other arrays that can be destroyed. Director Li, Brother Fang Xing, you're going alone? Is that okay? Of course. Fang Xing smiled slightly. In the next moment, Director Li saw Fang Xing's feet shake, and 10 scales actually appeared on his body at the same time. And the moment the boy swallowed the scale, Director Li saw the boy's skeleton shrinking, her hair growing at a visible speed until it reached her waist. Her body was covered in a set of black armor, evenly distributed over her voluptuous body. What the hell? What was going on? Director Li was stupefied at this scene. Then I'm off. The corners of Fang Xing's mouth curled up slightly, which was completely different from the smile she had when she was in her youth form. In this form, her face had a more demonic charm. She took a step forward, and her entire body seemed to turn into the wind as she directly disappeared, so fast that Director Li couldn't keep up. Director Li didn't come back to his senses for a very, very long time. He turned his head with a stupefied expression and stared at Wang Ling. Senior Ling, from now on, should we call her Brother Fang Xing or Sister Fang Xing? Chapter 354. At the same time, on the other side, Lai Mengmeng's psychological counseling was being carried out in an orderly manner. Secretary Dakang of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had personally instructed him to conduct psychological counseling for the students. The severity of the Shuego sect incident wasn't just that the students who had eaten the fruit would eventually experience a spirit explosion, it could also cause severe psychological trauma to the students. Therefore, it was necessary to do psychological counseling. It wasn't just to tell the students that there were no shortcuts to true cultivation. More importantly, it was to give these students who had eaten the fruit a warning through psychological counseling. It was to make them reflect on their mistakes from the bottom of their hearts. 6 students were placed in Ward 12 and 13 respectively. When Lai Mengmeng entered the room, he was holding a register in his hand. Student Hero Gua, Student Super Chen An. Student Su Xiao, get ready. The psychological counseling is about to begin, and everyone has to do it. Please cooperate. After he said this, there was no response from the room for a long time. It could be said that it wasn't the least bit intimidating. Lai Mengmeng did his best to maintain a smile, but the corners of his mouth twitched. His gaze left the roster, and as soon as he looked up, he saw Dopey Gua and Super Chen, each holding a game console and playing. They were probably playing some online game, and their faces were flushed with joy. On the other side, Little Peanut was sitting on the edge of one of the beds and watching. Hands on his hips, Lai Mengmeng pointed at one of them and pretended to be angry. Can you be a little more serious? Put away the game console. I just ate a fruit, the teachers are making too much of a fuss. Dopey Gua put away the game console disinterestedly. When he looked up, his eyes met Lai Mengmeng's, and a surprised expression instantly appeared on his face. Dr. Song? Why is it you? At that moment, Lai Mengmeng finally saw Dopey Gua's face clearly. His eyes involuntarily welled up with sparkling tears. F***K. How could it be him? Note, for the ill-fated relationship between Lai Mengmeng and Dopey Gua, please refer to Chapter 132, Physical Examination Before Highly Polluted Military Training. Lai Mengmeng still couldn't forget the scene of Dopey Gua personally teaching him how to test his anus during No. 60 High School's military training last time. Back then, he would even dream that his anus had been blown up when he slept, and the psychological trauma had been too great. I didn't expect to meet Dr. Song here today. Dopey Gua scratched his head and smiled like a fool. You're going to give us psychological counseling? Lai Mengmeng sighed. His expression suddenly became somewhat resentful. Yes, Dopey Gua, so, you're a temp again? Do you need money again? Lai Mengmeng immediately felt like he had been shot in the knee. F***ck me. Don't expose the truth. He put his hands on his waist and tried his best to straighten his back. I'm a regular, okay? Although it had indeed been many years since he had graduated from university, a great teacher still produced a great disciple. Lai Mengmeng felt that even if another 10 or so years passed, he would never forget the psychology knowledge he had mastered in university. Most importantly, he hadn't neglected his psychology course in the past few years and had a formal psychologist's certificate. Otherwise, the municipal bureau wouldn't have assigned him this job. Especially in recent years, the country had become crazy about all kinds of proof. In the most extreme cases, people even wanted to prove that their mother was their mother. Lai Mengmeng smiled. Why? Do you want to see my certificate? Enough, it's not like a few years ago. A few years ago, it would indeed have been very chaotic. In kindergartens, for example, some people don't even have a kindergarten teacher certificate, yet they become teachers. They specialize in harming the flowers of the motherland. Dopey Gua waved his hand and said with a sigh. Lai Mengmeng smiled bitterly. I couldn't tell, but you, little fatty, are such an understanding person. My uncle told me. Dopey Gua sighed and pointed to his face bitterly. I now seriously suspect that my face was harmed by those unscrupulous teachers when I was young. Lai Mengmeng. Super Chen shook his head and patted Dopey Gua on the shoulder. Don't be discouraged, old Gua. Actually, you're not that ugly, and you're quite good-looking. Little Peanut also nodded. In any case, it's not like I can't get a wife in the future. So what if I'm good looking? Don't you still have your parrot, Dopey? Why haven't I seen you with it recently? Dopey Gwa dropped his forehead. That fruit. Dopey also ate it. It's now being examined at the veterinary department. Super Chen, Little Peanut, Lai Mengmeng. Roughly 5 minutes later, Lai Mengmeng's psychological counseling officially began. He called the three of them together and began the first step of the whole process. His fingers twirling the fountain pen swiftly, he looked down at the diagnosis and treatment book in his hand, then turned to the three of them and asked, "Why did you eat the fruit?" This was actually a very important question. On the way to the hospital, the teachers in charge of each class had also asked the students similar questions. In the end, they discovered that some of the students really hadn't eaten the fruit because they wanted to become stronger or because they wanted to take a cultivation shortcut. Instead, they had eaten it by mistake without knowing it at all. Thus, before the formal psychological counseling, Lai Mengmeng felt that it was necessary to clarify the situation first. After all, psychological counseling was specially designed for students who had deliberately eaten the fruit for the sake of strength. Lai Mengmeng pointed to Super Chen. "You first." Super Chen nodded. "I have a friend. When I came home from school that day, I texted him how I could quickly become stronger in a short time. He said that it would be very difficult in a short time, unless I cheated. As long as I ate the fruit, I could obtain a steady stream of strength. Then, he showed me how to eat the fruit. Later, I realized that this wasn't what I needed. If I wanted to become stronger, I absolutely couldn't eat this kind of fruit of unknown origin." The corners of Lai Mengmeng's mouth twitched. "And then?" Super Chen sighed. "But my mom didn't know. She thought it was a relative who sent it, so she directly cut it into a plate and put it on my desk. When I ate it, I thought it was just an ordinary fruit." Lai Mengmeng, taking a deep breath, Lai Mengmeng looked at Dopey Gwa. "What about you, Dopey Gwa? My situation is pretty much the same. Every day after school, I cut fruit for Dopey to eat. I eat the skin and he eats the meat, and then we both fell for it together. So, you all ate it by mistake." Startled, Lai Mengmeng turned to look at Little Peanut. "Why did you eat the fruit?" Little Peanut smiled awkwardly and scratched his head. "Because I was hungry." Lai Mengmeng. Chapter 355. It was past 10:00 when Wang Ling and Fang Xing had still been working on the magic array. After capturing Chou Shixi alive, Wang Ming and Audiobook finally found Xiao Yunqing in a small alley with bloodshot eyes. The fruit which Shuigo's sect had fed Xiao Yunqing had almost completely dissolved in his body. Even from a distance, Wang Ming and Audiobook could feel an indescribable sense of oppression. This kind of pressure was different from the spiritual pressure released by a normal cultivator. It was an uncontrollable aura pressure, which was precisely a sign of extreme danger. It proved that the concentration of spiritual energy in Xiao Yunqing's body was about to reach saturation. Wang Ming wiped at his sweat. Because of Chou Shixi, they had really wasted too much time. Fortunately, it was not too late. The situation could still be salvaged. "What should we do, second brother? We can't get close at all." At the mouth of the alley, Audiobook and Wang Ming felt heavy pressure. If it wasn't for the long johns they were wearing, the pressure might have been even greater. And from a certain perspective, Xiao Yunqing's aura was already infinitely close to the peak of the nascent soul stage. Under such an uncontrollable pressure, it was already a miracle to be able to resist the pressure, let alone walk. This once again demonstrated the fearsomeness of the fruit developed by Shuigo's sect. He was only at the foundation establishment stage, but under the power of the fruit, the spirit energy contained in his body had been forcibly raised to an untouchable level. Xiao Yunqing was currently enduring enormous pain both physically and mentally. But Audiobook was also deeply aware that it was a good thing that this person was Xiao Yunqing. The Xiao clan's inner and outer sect promotion system was very strict. As the number one in the Xiao clan's outer sect, Xiao Yunqing must have put in more effort than an ordinary person. If it weren't for Xiao Yunqing, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. "Don't worry, I'll set you free right away." Holding the sword, Wang Ming poured spirit energy into it from his ring. Then, with a whoosh, the heavenly materials sword turned into a beam of light and shot towards Xiao Yuncheng. It actually split the aura apart? Zhuo was greatly astonished. He had never known that the heavenly materials sword could actually have this kind of function. Not only could this sword chi seal spirits, but it could also ignore spiritual pressure. This sword is too abnormal. Fortunately, Master took it back in time. This was Zhuo's thought as he was secretly horrified. Furthermore, he was very glad that the Master of Immortal Mansion's sword-forging plan had ultimately failed. In terms of material quality alone, this heavenly materials sword was indeed impeccable. It was a sword that the Master of Immortal Mansion had spent nearly half his life's blood and sweat to create. Zhuo had already appraised its grade long ago, and it was a first-class saint-level sword. A first-grade sacred artifact. In fact, in this era, for countless cultivators, it was already considered a priceless treasure. Furthermore, under normal circumstances, if one were to engage in a battle of a higher cultivation level, it was very important that one's magic tool was superior to the opponent's. At that time, Qingyu, the Master of Immortal Mansion, had used the heavenly materials sword and his intrinsic spirit field. Even though he was an itinerant immortal, he had the strength to fight Fang Xing, who had used 2 supreme spells in succession and had reached the true immortal realm in his complete form, and had even had the upper hand. This was enough to prove how terrifying the heavenly materials sword was. The only regret was that this sword didn't have a sword spirit. Whether a spirit sword was strong or not depended 30% on the sword material and 70% on the sword spirit. It was clear that Qingyu, the Master of Immortal Mansion, was also well aware of this. Unfortunately, he had found Jinka in the end. Wang Ming had already thought of using the heavenly materials sword's characteristics to launch a long-range attack when he couldn't get close. At that moment, wherever the heavenly materials sword passed, the aura emitted by Xiao Yunqing in the depths of the alleyway was dispersed by sword chi. Wang Ming and Zhuo took this opportunity to close in on Xiao Yunqing as the spiritual pressure dispersed. Xiao Yunqing's eyes were bloodshot as he lurked in a corner of the alleyway, vigilantly staring at his surroundings like a wild beast. His reflexes were very quick. When he saw the sword light flying toward him, he actually directly jumped on the spot and easily dodged the spirit sword's pursuit. The heavenly materials sword wasn't fast enough to catch up to Xiao Yunqing at all. Wang Ming relied on the charging spirit ring stored in his ring to control the spirit sword to attack, but there was still a gap between him and a cultivator who relied on true strength to control a spirit sword. Furthermore, looking at the current situation, Zhuo felt that even if he controlled the heavenly materials sword, it wouldn't be of much use. After Xiao Yunqing had been strengthened by the fruit, whether it was in terms of speed or strength, he was no longer at the golden core stage. At the very least, he would need to be at the nascent soul or soul formation stage to have a chance of attacking Xiao Yunqing with the heavenly materials sword. Brother Air, can you use the brain deduction technique? Zhuo recalled Wang Ming's miraculous ability when he had dealt with Chou Shixi. If he could trap Xiao Yunqing in his brain's layers of inception like Chou Shixi had, he might have a chance. When the opponent is delirious, the brain deduction technique won't work. Wang Ming shook his head. This was one of the biggest limitations of the brain deduction technique. The most crucial step of this technique was actually like hypnosis. Through some actions, the enemy would be given some hints, and then the enemy would unknowingly enter the space of the brain deduction technique. But unfortunately, once the opponent's thoughts were confused, the suggestion wouldn't work, and the spell wouldn't work. Xiao Yunqing was provoked, and he roared even more furiously as he bared his teeth at Wang Ming and Zhuo. A sharp killing intent made all the hair on Zhuo's body stand on end. Brother Air, be careful. Watch me. Wang Ming raised his hand again, and spirit light blossomed from the ring on his finger as a scroll actually flew out. Xiao Yunqing, look, what's this? Holding the scroll, Wang Ming pulled on the red string on the side, and the scroll unfurled on its own. Zhuo was astonished to find that Xiao Yunqing was actually staring at the painting without moving. Even his murderous aura had been completely withdrawn. At that moment, Xiao Yunqing felt like he had woken up, and even the blood red in his eyes seemed to have dimmed a lot. In the end, he actually dropped to his knees directly. Now, taking advantage of Xiao Yunqing's dazed state, Wang Ming once again maneuvered the heavenly materials sword to close in on Xiao Yunqing from behind. The sword light brushed past Xiao Yunqing's shoulder, creating a wound that was neither shallow nor deep. At that moment, the blood red in Xiao Yunqing's eyes dissipated, and his aura weakened continuously as he fell to the ground with a thud. Brother Air, what kind of magic treasure is this? Why is it so powerful? Odd Zhuo was greatly shaken by this scene. Wang Ming threw the scroll to Odd Zhuo. It's nothing, it's just a painting. Staring at the painting, the corners of Odd Zhuo's mouth twitched. This was actually a painting of the Yan Emperor using the angry Buddha fire lotus. Looking at Xiao Yunqing lying on the ground, Wang Ming spread his hands helplessly. The people of the Xiao clan are all descendants of the Yan Emperor, and their feelings for this ancestor are very deep. It's a natural reaction to kneel down when you see the ancestor's painting. Odd Zhuo. Chapter 356. In the temporary lounge of Second Hospital, some of the teachers from number 60 high school were drinking coffee, feeling physically and mentally exhausted. Although golden core cultivators could stay up late for several days and nights, or even dozens of days without sleep, they couldn't withstand the mental and psychological exhaustion, which even golden core cultivators couldn't do. No one knew that something like this would actually happen at this critical juncture after school today. After work, the teachers rushed to the hospital one by one to show concern for the students, and also to appease some agitated parents. Most parents were actually sensible, but there were always those who would pester endlessly. When something happened to their children at school, they wouldn't analyze the cause themselves, but would first blame the school and the teachers. This made those female teachers who didn't have balls feel exceptionally pained. In fact, apart from those like Super Chin, Dopey Gua, and Little Peanut who had eaten the fruit by mistake, the vast majority of the students who had eaten the fruit for the sake of strength had a lot to do with their family's education. The parents of these students who had eaten the fruit for the sake of strength generally had very high expectations of them. Furthermore, if they didn't get the results their parents had hoped for, they would be severely criticized or even beaten. After all that had been said and done, it was actually the parents' own doing. The pressure on the children was really too much. According to the thoughts of most parents, apart from wanting their children to get good results in the college entrance examination, they also wanted their children to advance to the Golden Core realm before they graduated from high school. This was because this way, they would be able to receive the Super Panacea subsidy from the government, and their future could be said to be bright and prosperous. But how could it be so easy to advance to the Golden Core stage? In modern times, with the help of all kinds of elixirs and supplements, the time it took to advance from the foundation establishment stage to the Golden Core stage was greatly shortened. But while the time was shortened, many parents overlooked a very important issue, and that was talent. Given the same conditions, some people would advance to the Golden Core stage in a very short time, while others might need decades or even centuries. Talent wasn't something that could be improved by eating a talent pill in a game. After all, there was no such thing in the real world. But parents were in the end parents. They always believed that their children had talent. That they were the smartest. They should advance to the Golden Core stage in a short time. The teachers had always been bitter and troubled by this type of parent. Nowadays, you couldn't tell the truth in society, or it would be easy for people to hate you. A group of no. 60 high teachers were chatting in the lounge when Teacher Yi walked in with a dejected expression, his face as pale as a zombie's. What's wrong? A female teacher stood up and helped Teacher Yi to a chair. Seeing this, Teacher Pan hurriedly handed him a glass of water and sighed. It's probably because those parents are making a fuss. Hearing this, Teacher Ye's eyes actually turned red, and he looked like he had suffered a lot. Hearing this, Teacher Ye's eyes actually turned red, and he looked like he had suffered a lot. Teacher Pan cupped her chin. Judging from your expressions, could it be that the parent you ran into was that Su from the remedial class? The female teacher on the side was startled. Teacher Pan, you can even tell? After all, this is the most difficult parent in our school to deal with. Teacher Pan looked at the young female teacher next to her. You haven't been working at our number 60 high school for very long. You'll get to know her in the future. Yi school 60 yi high, and teacher, school, yi 2 and 1111, school, and high 2 1, and 1, of long and well of and 1, the female teacher. There's only one remedial class in our number 60 high school, right? Although it's a remedial class, the teachers are the best. Teacher Pan shook her head. It's no use. For some students who really can't learn, it's no use giving them Civil Star Monarch. The female teacher, Old Antique, leaned against the wall and sighed. Sue's mom is too much. Not only did she scold me, she even pointed at Old Ye's nose and called him a good-for-nothing. She asked Old Ye why he had taught his kids so badly that he wanted to eat fruit to increase his strength. The problem is, Old Ye is just a physical education teacher. The female teacher, if it wasn't for the school guard, Old Lee, holding her back, it seems like Sue's mother would have made a move. We've already found a psychologist to calm Sue's mother down, and Headmaster Chen has personally gone over. Old Antique slapped his face helplessly. For the first time, he was so angry that he didn't even have the appetite to eat spicy strips. Why did I end up with this kind of parent? There's no other way. Teacher Pan also spread her hands. She stared at the dejected Teacher Yi next to her, and tried her best to brainstorm for something to say to comfort him. For any teacher, even if it was just a physical education teacher, it would be very damaging to their self-esteem if their teaching ability was questioned. There was a saying, the master leads the way, but the cultivation depends on the individual. After cooking, they had to learn to eat it themselves. Nowadays, teachers were eager to personally feed their students their food, but some students were still too lazy to open their mouths. There was nothing they could do about it. Teacher Yi, don't be too sad. Teacher Pan crouched down and pointed out the window. Look. Stars. Teacher Yi looked up, his face expressionless. Because Teacher Yi couldn't raise his spirits, the lounge fell into a brief silence. Every teacher would have the experience of being questioned in the workplace. These old teachers were already used to it. As for the young teachers, when they saw Teacher Ye's pitiful appearance, they all felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. However, as number 60 high's teaching pioneer, Teacher Pan was in the end Teacher Pan. He immediately analyzed the situation from the perspective of the overall situation. Actually, I have a deep understanding of Teacher Ye's situation today. A small number of parents often question my teaching ability. As a teacher who has been fighting hard on the front lines of number 60 high's teaching for many years, I suggest that all of us teachers should learn to correct our attitudes. Then, what should we do? Asked the young female teacher. It's very simple, Teacher Pan replied. Do you know how to throw the blame to others? Even if I'm teaching the elite class, I will repeatedly emphasize to them in the first class every year that they are the worst class I've ever taught. All the teachers. They finally found the source of this popular saying in the teaching circle. Teacher Pan looked at Teacher Yi and smiled. Teacher Yi, don't be too discouraged. Although you were ridiculed by your parents today, at the very least, you still don't have a girlfriend. There's still more than half a year. You have to work hard to look forward. Chapter 357. His own tragic experience proved one thing: the relationship between parents and teachers was in fact far from as simple as it looked. Although their starting point was the same, and they all wanted the children to grow up, there were times when even teachers had the urge to fall out with some unreasonable parents. Sue's mom was very famous in number 60 high. She had been in grade 1's remedial class for a full 4 years, but was still held back. Almost everyone in the school had heard of her, and only a few young teachers who had just started and weren't fully familiar with the business were kept in the dark. All these years, because of Sue's mom's troublemaking, Headmaster Chen had thought of many ways to persuade Sue to drop out. Sue wasn't a temporary student, but an official student of number 60 high, and his exam results every year would be included in the overall results. And it just so happened that Sue's grades were a drag on the school every year. In recent years, number 60 High had been upgraded to a key city high school, and Headmaster Chen really didn't want to make any careless mistakes. But there was a good saying, it was easy to invite a god in, but difficult to send him away, this student Hu Su had been personally recruited by number 60 High. Although his parents were a little unreasonable, Hu Su's usual style of study and lifestyle was pretty good. He was obedient and sensible at school, and often helped his teachers and classmates. It was just that his grades couldn't go up no matter what. It actually didn't make sense to persuade an official student to drop out just because of his grades. Furthermore, if word got out, he might even be accused of poor education. Because of this, Headmaster Chen's various strategies for persuading Hu Su to drop out of the school were dispelled. The most painful thing about this whole matter was that he couldn't think carefully about what Hu Su's mom said. If you thought about it carefully, it actually made sense. When my kid entered school, he was already an official student of your number 60 High, even if he was in a remedial class. His usual style of study, lifestyle, and personality were all very good, but his grades just couldn't go up no matter what. It had been 4 whole years, and he hadn't made any progress at all. If he didn't blame the school, who was to blame? Regarding this, Headmaster Chen could be said to be extremely bitter. In the lounge, Teacher Pan and the other senior teachers took this opportunity to give the new teachers a good lesson on the story of Hu Su and his mother, causing this group of young teachers to have deep doubts about their education career, which they had been so full of expectations for in the past. In this day and age, it wasn't just medicine that couldn't save people, even a teacher can't save him. While they were chatting, Teacher Pan suddenly realized that old Antique had disappeared. Where's Lao Wang? One of the teachers replied. I think he was called out by the principal just now. Old Wang also teaches history for the remedial class. I heard he's good at comforting Hu Su's mother, no matter who it was. After entering the workplace, they would feel that working was not easy. It was the same for all professions. In addition to settling down, they also had to learn to speak well and be wary of others making things difficult for them. Rin Jianghu, one cannot help oneself. Thus, after entering the era of national cultivation, many cultivators continued to do what they used to do in the cultivation era, such as Immortal Toya refining elixirs or Fatty Luo's metal shop refining weapons. Although these jobs were very complicated, they were profit-making, and the most important thing was that they could do things without having to look at other people's faces. After persuading Hu Su's mother to leave, old Antique leaned his slightly plump body against the wall and thought for a long time. There were actually very complicated reasons why he had chosen to become a teacher. If he had to say one, it was because old Antique felt that this profession was very honorable. After chewing on a spicy strip in the hospital toilet, old Antique felt a lot calmer. He looked at the time and frowned slightly. He had placed an online order for an item earlier, and the electronic order had indicated that it would be delivered in 20 minutes. Now that the time was almost up, old Antique was wondering whether or not he should go to the entrance of the hospital to pick up the delivery. In the end, just as he was about to carry it out, a voice suddenly came from the toilet cubicle next to him. Excuse me, are you Mr. Wang? Old Antique was stunned. I am. As soon as he said this, old Antique opened the cubicle door and saw a man in diving gear emerge from the toilet cubicle. Then, dripping wet, he bowed to old Antique. Shun Feng God Express. Your mission will be accomplished. Old Antique was still astonished. How did you get in? He had long heard that Shun Feng God Express was currently the most efficient express delivery team in the country. As long as an urgent item was taken in the same city, it would be delivered to the customer within 20 minutes. But old Antique had never experienced it before. Today was his first time experiencing it, and it had really broadened his horizons. How had this courier gotten in when the police were so heavily on guard outside? This was a very strange question. The courier took a breath. There are too many police officers outside. It actually wasn't easy to deliver this. After I received the package, I drew up a map and deduced your coordinates, then dug a tunnel in a park 300 li away. I used the bone shrinking technique to enter the city's sewer system, and finally confirmed with the GPS that you were here. Mr. Wang, after receiving this, please give me a 5-star rating, rolled Antique. Saying this, the courier took out a square box from his storage space. "Sir, your express delivery." Rolled antique. "The thing inside, is it broken?" The courier. "This box is waterproof, so it's definitely fine. But whether it's broken or not, it's hard to say." Rolled antique. "I'm insured." "Oh, of course. If it's broken, we'll definitely compensate you at the original price, but I actually don't know whether the thing in the box is broken or not. It could be good, or it could be bad." The courier gave a very serious analysis. From the perspective of quantum mechanics, it could be good and bad at the same time. Rolled antique. The courier. "It's only in the instant you open the box that these two possibilities converge into one. This is a very famous theorem called Schrödinger's cat." Hearing this, old antique almost knelt down. "I'm sorry, big brother, I wasted your time." The courier nodded calmly and took out the rating device. "It's our duty to answer customers' questions. Sir, please rate my service this time. If there's a problem with the express delivery, please click the feedback button below the electronic order app, and we'll have someone follow up." The corner of old antique's mouth twitched, and he trembled as he pressed the 5-star button, both his hands shaking. Nowadays, were all courier workers so awesome? R/R/R. Chapter 358. Seeing that old antique had pressed the button for full marks, the courier little brother nodded in satisfaction. It really wasn't easy to deliver packages nowadays. In addition to being paid according to the bill, the monthly bonus and year-end bonus were all assessed based on the rate of good reviews. So a full mark was very important. However, whether it was a courier little brother or a delivery little brother, both achieved the same result through different means. If the delivery was a little slow, the customer might give him a bad review. Old antique suddenly felt that these people were really going all out to increase his rate of good reviews. In this day and age, there was a need for more understanding in society. In social news online, it was really dirty to personally attack a courier or delivery just because it was a little late. Everyone was raised by their parents. Who wouldn't feel sorry for being beaten or scolded? After accepting the parcel, old antique saw that the courier little brother had put on his diving equipment again. "How are you going to get out?" The courier little brother smiled. "I'll go out the way I came. The security outside is too tight. This is the only way to get in. Fortunately, I learned the bone shrinking technique from a senior called Oil Bottle when I was young, otherwise I definitely wouldn't have been able to deliver this urgent package in time." Old antique was still in a daze when he heard the words, "Oil Bottle." Half of the courier little brother's body was already in the squat pit. "Well, Mr. Wang, could I trouble you to press the flush button for me?" Old antique. Then, with the sound of rushing water, the courier little brother wearing professional diving equipment disappeared into the squat pit. After the courier left, old antique opened the express delivery box. It looked very big, but in fact, there was only a very small glass bottle inside. The glass bottle was sandwiched in the middle of the box with foam, and it was kept in a sealed state. Old antique tore open the plastic and took out the glass bottle. After repeatedly confirming that the bottle was in good condition, he finally relaxed. Who knew what this express delivery box had gone through when it had arrived here? If the bottle had been damaged during transport, even if it was just a small crack, the medicinal properties of the elixir inside the bottle would leak out, and its efficacy would be greatly reduced. Old antique had bought this elixir from an online shopping mall, and it would play a crucial role in the upcoming battle. On the other side, Wang Ling stood alone on the rooftop of the hospital as he calmly observed his surroundings. Director Li was already busy with his own work. His task was just to bring Wang Ling to the hospital rooftop, and that was all. He actually couldn't be of much help. After all, he was about to face one of the few epic-level assassins in the assassin world. Director Li was only at the gold core stage. Even if he had 10 heads here, it would not be enough. Of course, Wang Ling hadn't been idle either. While on the rooftop, he had been preparing for a possible battle. According to the information provided by Killer Taoist, it was very likely that Taoist Tao Tai was now an itinerant immortal or even a true immortal. Wang Ling didn't know if old antique's cultivation had advanced after all these years of teaching. But from a theoretical point of view, there was always the realm of an itinerant immortal. At the very least, this epic battle was between two loose immortals. What was the concept of two itinerant immortals fighting? If they weren't prepared, Songhai City could be demolished at will. They could directly demolish the city and even save on the demolition fees. And if it was a fight between two true immortals, the level of destruction would at the very least reach the level of a nation. As for demolishing the earth, Wang Ling felt that in the current spirit energy information era, apart from him, who was unrestricted by his power without the Tao Talisman, there was no one else who could demolish the earth. Wang Ling had written runes on the four corners of the rooftop. The four runes were linked, and as long as someone set foot on the rooftop, a barrier would automatically form. Furthermore, they could only come in and not leave. He had already destroyed the invisible magic array that had been set up on the rooftop. As the person who had set up the array, Taoist Taotai would definitely come to check whether it was intact. When that happened, the fish would take the bait. The barrier formed by the four corners of the formation completely separated the rooftop of the hospital into an independent space. No matter how fiercely the two of them fought, as long as they could not shake the barrier, the fluctuations of the loose immortals would not be transmitted out. In this way, at least the rest of the innocent people wouldn't be affected. Next, he just had to wait for the protagonist of the story to make his appearance. Actually, Wang Ling really wasn't very good at mediating a fight. After all, from the moment he was born to the moment he broke a magic sword in half at the age of 1, what he was best at was demolition. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He cast a spell to conceal his aura, and like a chameleon, he completely blended in with the air. Roughly 10 minutes later, just as Wang Ling had expected, Old Antique pushed open the rooftop door and dragged his slightly plump body inside. At the same time, a black figure wearing a mask also descended from the sky. It was as if these two fellow brothers, who hadn't seen each other for 100 years, had agreed to appear at the same place at the same time. They faced each other in silence, and didn't notice Wang Ling's presence on the side, let alone the barrier that he had secretly set up. Wang Ling didn't want to expose his identity in front of Old Antique. No matter what Old Antique's previous identity was, he was now still his history teacher, and Wang Ling didn't want this matter to break their teacher-student relationship. Otherwise, when he went back to school, Old Antique would have to call him Ling Junren, which would be very awkward. Dozens of seconds later, huge spirit waves actually rose up behind the two people who had met each other. This was a manifestation of spirit power overflowing after the release of spiritual pressure, which turned the originally invisible spiritual pressure into a visible form like raging waves. Wang Ling frowned. Judging from the instantaneous burst of spirit power, both of them were stronger than he had expected, and were actually stronger than he had imagined. Their spirit power was so enormous that not only did it turn into a physical substance, even the space around them was distorted. Wang Ling hid in the dark and observed. Boom! At that moment, the spirit waves from both sides suddenly surged forward and collided with a loud bang. However, neither of them was injured, and they both took a slight step back. Under the mask, Taoist Taotai sneered. Senior brother, although your appearance has changed, your cultivation seems to have advanced a little compared to before you left the killing circle. What? Do you plan to make a comeback? Old Antique smiled slightly and waved his hand. It's impossible for me to make a comeback, not in this lifetime. It's better to be a teacher. It's not worth living in fear every day. Hearing this, the corners of Taoist Taotia's mouth couldn't help twitching under the mask. Junior brother has already experienced senior brother's hiding skills. You're actually hiding in school to teach. You're even better at hiding than Jia Yuding. Old Antique. Chapter 359. The classic showdown between two epic-level killers was no less than the duel between the Old Devil and General E back then. The difference was that the duel between the Old Devil and General E had been watched by millions of people, while Wang Ling was the only audience for this duel between these two epic-level killers. It was already late at night. Old Antique and Taoist Taotai stood facing each other on the hospital rooftop as a cool breeze blew past them. The lights on the rooftop had already been destroyed when the two's auras had collided with each other. The lampshade had directly been shaken into fine dust and had drifted off to who knew where. Even the ground was covered in mottled cracks caused by the collision of auras, which looked very sinister from a distance. Now, Wang Ling suddenly felt that he had made the right decision to have directly withdraw and set up the barrier on the rooftop. Both of them were very strong, at least in terms of auras. Their explosive power was stronger than that of anyone Wang Ling had ever seen. In terms of spirit power alone, they were about the same level as Qing Yu, the master of Immortal Mansion, at his peak, but their explosive power was truly terrifying. It was impossible to achieve this kind of explosive power without accumulating it for hundreds or even thousands of years. For a normal cultivator, there was a process from the generation of spirit power to the generation of spiritual pressure. No matter how short it was still a subtle process. At that very moment, whether it was old antique or Taoist Taotai, both of them could instantly erupt with power without any delay. If Wang Ling wasn't included, only people who dealt with killers all year round could do this. Watching the battle from the scene, Wang Ling noticed that after the first collision of auras, the two of them exchanged greetings for a while before falling silent again. These two fellow disciples hadn't seen each other for a long time. It wasn't that they couldn't talk, but that they didn't know where to start. Both of their hearts were in a mess. After a long while, it was old antique who spoke first. "I want to know your real purpose." Wang Ling's eyes lit up slightly at this question. Judging from the invisible magic array on the rooftop, Taoist Taotai hadn't spent so much money on this show just to exact revenge, but to use this revenge to carry out his other purpose. The invisible magic array had the effect of storing spirit power, and after a spirit explosion, it would definitely collect a considerable amount of spirit power. What was the ultimate goal of accumulating such a massive amount of spirit power? In any case, in Wang Ling's opinion, it probably wasn't anything good. Old Antique's question made Taoist Taotai fall into a long silence, and then he smiled bitterly under his mask. "Senior brother, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know?" In the end, Taoist Taotai took a deep breath and said, "To open the gate between worlds, of course." "Why do you want to open the gate between worlds?" Old Antique narrowed his eyes. "Even if you want to open it, you should know that the gate between worlds can't be opened in a short period of time." The fluctuations of the gate between worlds had already been detected during the survival contest during the military training exercise for the 6 schools, and Old Antique hadn't forgotten it. But later on, the gate between worlds mysteriously disappeared, and no one knew why. Later, General E attributed this incident to the old devil's mistake. In fact, there was no way Old Antique could have guessed that the person who had closed the gate between worlds was in fact secretly observing them right now. If you want to summon the gate between worlds, there's a 5-year deadline. But it's not impossible to summon it continuously in a short period of time. Taoist Taotai sneered. "Every time I summon the gate between worlds, I need to pour in a huge amount of spirit power. As long as my plan succeeds this time, I'll have enough spirit power to summon the gate between worlds 10 times. Summoning the gate between worlds at a cost of 10 times the amount of spirit power, what kind of operation was this?" Since his first encounter with the gate between worlds 6 years ago, Wang Ling had done a lot of research in private, but he had never heard of anyone using double the amount of spirit power to summon the gate between worlds. First of all, the 5-year cooldown period was set in stone, and there was no way it could be changed. Furthermore, if you wanted to summon the gate between worlds, apart from knowing the summoning array, the most important thing was spirit power reserves. Back then, in order to summon the gate between worlds, the old devil had burned no less than 100 treasured holy weapons. Thus, Wang Ling's first reaction was that Taoist Taotai seemed to have misunderstood something about summoning the gate between worlds. What was used to summon the gate between worlds was a summoning array exclusive to the gate between worlds, and wasn't a refining array. Equivalent exchange was completely useless here. Then what happens after summoning the gate between worlds? Old Antique asked. "I received reliable information that there's a kind of holy water on the other side of the gate that can restore my appearance," Taoist Taotai replied. This answer could be said to be quite simple and crude, and could be summed up in 4 words: "I want to get plastic surgery." In the end, the whole matter came back to Taoist Taotia's face. Wang Ling still remembered the gossip old antique had told him in history class. In fact, Taoist Taotai wasn't born ugly. It was just because he had cultivated the wrong technique that his face had become distorted and uglier. Whether it was plastic surgery or the use of elixirs, he would revert to his original appearance in a quarter of an hour. Old Antique had never expected this to be the root of all evil and the whole matter. He had underestimated his junior brother's obsession with plastic surgery and shaping his appearance. It's so painful to be ugly. Senior brother will probably never understand, right? Taoist Taotai adjusted his mask and said, "Ever since I became ugly, everything has changed. After us two fellow disciples left the martial arts world, we were equally famous, but every time we carried out a mission, people only remembered you, and not me. They couldn't even bear to look at me." "Junior brother, you're mistaken." Old Antique was silent. "Of course not," Taoist Taotai bellowed. "Once, when I went on a mission, I finally managed to assassinate a criminal for my employer, but when I paid the bill, my employer gave me a bad review. Do you know why?" Old Antique. Taoist Taotai, he asked me why I was facing him with my butt. Old Antique, Wang Ling. Taoist Taotai clutched his chest and gasped for breath, looking very agitated. "The whole world made a fuss about my ugliness, and anyone who saw my face would vomit, except Black Gauze. But you actually killed him." Old Antique was silent for a bit before he sighed. "I didn't know he was so close to you." Taoist Taotia's mask trembled, and he released a cold killing intent. "I've already set up 30 invisible magic arrays for storing spirit power within a radius of 500 li. I'm determined to succeed in my plan." Chapter 360. Who did this? Who the hell did this? Under the mask, Taoist Taotai roared, and the sound directly turned into a shockwave that blasted towards Old Antique. Old Antique raised his hand lightly and neutralized the impact. "Senior brother, you did this, didn't you?" As he spoke, Wang Ling felt the roots of Taoist Taotia's teeth chatter. Old Antique? And Wang Ling, the instigator of all this, was secretly observing on the side. For some reason, Wang Ling felt that things had become troublesome. But from the moment they had met until now, apart from the first collision of auras, they hadn't shown any obvious intention of fighting, which made it very awkward for Wang Ling to watch on the side, because he felt that he would only be able to display his skills when they really started fighting. So whether to fight or not to fight, Wang Ling didn't know what to do. Then there was another problem. When they really started fighting, how on earth could he help resolve the conflict between these two fellow disciples and mediate the fight without exposing his own identity? Wang Ling had already skimmed through the outline of Mother Wang's novel. There weren't any large-scale group attack skills in the outline. Most of them were single-point assassination attacks, which were all tailor-made for the assassin profession. So Wang Ling guessed that if the two of them really started fighting, it would most likely be in close combat and using hidden weapons. Among them, the most famous close combat skill in Mother Wang's novel was the 1,000 years of anal explosion kill. Thus, Wang Ling felt that if the two of them really started fighting, the scene would definitely be very beautiful. The two of them were silent for several minutes as they faced each other. Old Antique slowly said, "Actually, you didn't intend to sacrifice these kids downstairs to accumulate spirit power to restore your appearance, did you? You made such a big fuss just to lure me out. If this array for storing spirit power was really so important, you definitely wouldn't be reacting like this." Under the mask, Taoist Taotia's face darkened. "Senior brother, what do you know?" "Old Antique, you and I both entered the Ghost Axe sect because we picked up a cultivation manual. You've revered Shizuan ever since you were young. Although we've never met Shizuan in person, you can't possibly violate the sect rules that Shizuan wrote on the title page of the cultivation manual. Although our Ghost Axe sect is a sect that specializes in assassinations, the people we assassinate are the most vicious and evil people in the cultivation world." Speaking up to this point, Old Antique sighed. "Shizuan said that every time you kill a vicious criminal, you get 100 killer merit points. Once he collected 1 million, he would be able to meet his master in person. However, if the innocent were harmed, 500,000 merit points would be deducted. From the day we picked up the original copy of the cultivation method, we dreamed of meeting Master. This is the only thing you will never change. Wang Ling was greatly shocked by these words. Mother Wang had indeed written about killer merit points in the outline of her novel, but that was just a setting in the outline. Wang Ling dropped his forehead into his hand and suddenly felt a deep pain in the ass. He never thought that these two people would actually interpret it to this extent, so when I found out it was you who did it, I wasn't worried at all. I grew up with you. When we were kids, you couldn't even bear to kill an ant. How could you be so heartless as to kill this bunch of innocent children? Speaking up to this point, Old Antique simply sat down cross-legged with a very solemn expression on his face. Feeling around in his pocket, he took out a bag of spicy strips. He took one out and put it in his mouth, then raised the package to the man in front of him and asked, "Do you want it?" "It's delicious." Taoist Taotai was speechless for a very long time. He took a deep breath. "Aren't you going to explain what happened with Black Gauze?" Old Antique was silent for a long time before he said sadly, "It was indeed my fault. So all these years, I've been atoning for it. But he's just a 6-year-old child." Taoist Taotai lowered his head, and 2 drops of tears rolled down from under his mask onto the ground. Although Wang Ling was very far away, he could see this scene very clearly. "I know." Old Antique's expression was as heavy as the atmosphere. "After what happened back then, you refused to listen to my explanation. Of course, I know that any explanation would be superfluous to you. When I came back from a mission back then, I didn't see you for a while, so I actually didn't know about Black Gauze's existence at all. I also didn't know that you and Black Gauze were actually so close." Taoist Taotai clenched his fists tightly. "After I became ugly, Black Gauze was the only one who looked me in the eye. Even you, senior brother, became like everyone else and refused to look me in the eye. You're wrong." Old Antique suddenly raised his head. "I've never discriminated against you. After you ruined your appearance by cultivating the wrong art, I also tried to cultivate it in order to find a way to break it, but unfortunately, I failed." Taoist Taotai was stunned. "Senior brother, what are you talking about?" Old Antique sighed. "I also became fat because I cultivated the wrong art. I didn't mean to hide from you, I just didn't want you to see me like this." Speaking up to this point, Old Antique took out a glass bottle from his chest pocket, which was the express delivery he had received in the toilet. "This bottle contains a powerful appearance-shaping pill that I bought online. With it, I can just about restore my original appearance. But unfortunately, it's getting shorter and shorter. At first, after I became fat because of cultivating the wrong art, I could last 2 or 3 days with a powerful appearance-shaping pill. But now, even 2 or 3 minutes is very difficult." Wang Ling was stunned. He hadn't expected the story to actually be like this. After listening to the whole story, Taoist Taotai also clenched his teeth tightly. The atmosphere was very sad, so sad that Wang Ling didn't know what to say. "I harmed Black Gauze and cultivated the wrong art, which caused me to become fat. More importantly, I didn't want you to see me like this. So after that, I directly withdrew from the killing circle. Now that I'm a teacher, it can be considered a kind of atonement." Old Antique laughed bitterly as he stood up from the ground and walked step by step toward Taoist Taotai. He opened his mouth, but wasn't able to say a single word. He couldn't help the tears in his eyes. "How about it, junior brother? Are you willing to forgive me?" Taoist Taotai didn't respond for a long time, but he was actually sobbing uncontrollably under his mask. 2 fellow disciples who had been enemies for a long time were actually crying their eyes out when they saw each other. The corner of Wang Ling's mouth twitched at this scene. He had spent half a day setting up the barrier, but in the end, these 2 people didn't even fight. They really didn't give him any face at all. Just as Wang Ling was lamenting in his heart, Taoist Taotai actually took out a photo from his chest pocket and stared at Old Antique, his voice a little choked up. You apologize to Black Gauze. Apologize. Then I'll forgive you. At the same time, Wang Ling, who was looking at this photo in the dark, was stupefied. If he wasn't wrong. The black gauze in the photo. Chapter 361. On the other side, Wang Ming's operation had been very smooth. After arriving at the hospital, he had immediately gathered all the children and sealed their spirits with the heavenly material sword. Audiobook had set up a curtain diagnosis and had Wang Ming treat the children through the curtain. After all, the heavenly materials sword was used to make a cut on each person's body. It would be very hard for both the students and the parents present to accept it if the heavenly materials sword was brazenly used to cut their wounds without any concealment. As it turned out, Wang Ling and grenade-throwing senior immortal's judgment had been correct. The heavenly materials sword indeed had a miraculous effect when faced with an abnormal concentration of spirit power. Furthermore, after sealing their spirits, the hospital had re-examined the concentration of spirit power in these children's bodies and found that it was gradually decreasing and slowly returning to the normal level of the foundation establishment stage. But because of the effect of the spirit seal, these children wouldn't be able to use their spirit energy normally for the next 3 to 5 days. Standing behind Wang Ming, Zhai Yin frowned deeply. You're pushing yourself too hard. Wang Ming shrugged indifferently. It doesn't matter. In any case, the spirit energy driving the spirit sword isn't my own. But even so, Wang Ming did indeed feel a little tired. He had been a hero tonight and had forgotten a little that he was still just an ordinary person. Furthermore, in dealing with Shuego's sex Cho Shirsi, the brain deduction technique had indeed consumed some of his energy. This is the last student, right? Wang Ming yawned behind the curtain and asked Audiobook. Audiobook nodded and pressed the button to call out the number. The student outside was already ready, and directly put his hand in through the window. Wang Ming gripped the heavenly materials sword with both hands, stood up, and aimed the blade at the student's arm. However, right at this moment, he felt a wave of dizziness in his head. The student's arm actually split right in front of his eyes, turning into countless phantom images, then, clang. The heavenly materials sword directly slipped from Wang Ming's hand and fell to the ground, creating a huge commotion. Zhai Yin sighed. Before Wang Ming could fall, she caught him firmly, and then directly gave him a princess carry. The air instantly fell silent as Audiobook stared at this scene with wide eyes. Zhai Yin stared at him. I'll leave the last child to you. I'll take him to rest first, and come back later to collect the sword. Audiobook, oh, all right. On the rooftop, the two of them were still talking about the past. After so many years of cleansing, the two brothers' mental states and emotions were actually much more stable than before, so today's opportunity was quite rare. Taking advantage of this opportunity to resolve some of the misunderstandings in the past through dialogue should be the most peaceful way to resolve the conflict. The two of them sat cross-legged facing each other. Old Antique was still holding Black Gauze's photo in his hand, and he couldn't help feeling melancholy and emotional. I'm sorry. Black Gauze, you were only 6, but I did that to you, in the dark. When Wang Ling saw this scene, he simply wanted to flip the table. What if King's 6-year-old? Taoist Taotia's heart ached as he looked at Old Antique from behind the mask and asked, I still want to know, senior brother, what on earth were you thinking at that time? Old Antique said, Junior brother, you should know that your senior brother usually pays great attention to health and maintenance. When I saw Black Gauze back then, I could tell at first glance that he was a spiritual awareness tortoise cub, which is hard to come by in 100 years. If a high-quality spiritual awareness tortoise cub like this was made into a dish at the current Kikshita house, it would cost at least 2,000 immortal gold bars. It's a great tonic. Normally, it wouldn't be kept as a pet. Under the mask, Taoist Taotia's face instantly darkened, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching at the same time. So, is this why you turned him into tortoise jelly? Wang Ling. Now, Wang Ling finally knew where Killer Taoist had learned the story of raising a dog and then eating it. It turned out that this master and disciple were of the same origin. Taoist Taotia's expression under the mask was very sorrowful. Everything happened too suddenly. In the time it took me to get my hair done, senior brother, you turned black gauze into tortoise jelly. Old Antique lowered his head in remorse. I was wrong, I was really wrong, Taoist Taotai gritted his teeth. Later, you have to come with me to burn incense at Black Gauze's grave. After a moment of silence, Old Antique finally nodded. All right, Taoist Taotai heaved a sigh of relief. Don't worry about the kids downstairs, I've already ordered people to deliver medicine to each family. Once this is over, I'll disband Shuego's sect. This will be a lesson to these kids. Although us two Marshall brothers only got to where we are today because we picked up the original copy of the Ghost Axe sex cultivation technique, it's not a big deal. But on the path of cultivation, we have to take it one step at a time. Old Antique Junior brother is right. On the side, Wang Ling listened to the whole story with a stupefied expression on his face. There were too many things to complain about, and for a moment, he didn't know where to start. This was a much bigger problem than the old devil breaking into the National Palace in order to find his girlfriend's reincarnation to drive the wheel of time. It was rare for Wang Ling to see such an obedient old antique. But the good news was that at least the way they resolved their conflict was relatively peaceful. Otherwise, Wang Ling felt that it would be really troublesome if they really started fighting. It was already very difficult for these two Marshall brothers to sit down and talk face to face in a calm manner hundreds of years after they had parted ways. This proved that they hadn't completely abandoned each other in their hearts. What could be better than letting bygones be bygones? Standing inside the barrier, Wang Ling looked at the scene in front of him with satisfaction. Just now, Ajua had sent him a text message to say that the matter with the kids in the hospital had been resolved, and that the heavenly materials sword spirit sealing effect had perfectly restrained the abnormal spirit power produced by the fruit. The whole matter could be considered to have come to a relatively satisfactory conclusion. Thus, Wang Ling raised his hand to undo the barrier, and was ready to leave. But at that moment, Taoist Taotai suddenly thought of something and abruptly looked at Old Antique. Senior brother, there's one more thing. The organization that provided me with intelligence previously said that you have a supreme weapon of mass destruction on you. Hearing this, Wang Ling paused. His gossipy heart was aroused again. Old Antique couldn't help laughing at this question. Who told you that? Taoist Taotai, is this fake news? Old Antique shook his head. No, in the past, I indeed had it, but now, this weapon of mass destruction no longer exists. Taoist Taotai asked, what do you mean? Old Antique didn't say anything, and just popped the powerful shaping pill he had bought online into his mouth. The pill immediately took effect when he swallowed it. Wang Ling saw Old Antique's entire body change in a faint spirit light. Taoist Taotai was suddenly enlightened. It turned out that this was Gorgeous Itinerant's great weapon of mass destruction. This was also Wang Ling's first time seeing Old Antique's Gorgeous Itinerant form. He didn't know how to describe the Old Antique in front of him. Wang Ling rubbed his nose, and actually noticed a drop of blood rolling down. Chapter 362. Many years later, the two brothers from Ghost Axe sect appeared in the demon world. They were spat out by a windstorm and landed on the top of a cliff in the demon world. The wind on the cliff brought with it a bone-chilling demon chi, and both of them couldn't help frowning slightly. Old Antique couldn't help sighing. So this is the inside of the gate between worlds. As expected, it's very unusual. Taoist Taotai nodded. No wonder it's said that the environment inside the gate between worlds is very harsh. The demon chi here alone is already very difficult to deal with. Given my and senior brother's realms, we can just about manage it. But if someone at the soul formation stage or below comes here without any defensive measures, they won't last even half a day. Speaking up to this point, Taoist Taotai suddenly sighed with emotion in his heart. Fortunately, he hadn't impulsively charged into the gate between worlds all those years ago. The environment here was much harsher than he had imagined. This time, the two brothers had buried the hatchet and entered together, and had made ample preparations, which gave Taoist Taotai a deep sense of relief. Their goal this time was the legendary holy water of the demon world. According to reliable information which Taoist Taotai had obtained many years ago, the holy water of the demon world was in a remote village in the demon race inside the gate between worlds. As long as they could get their hands on the holy water, the side effects of cultivating the wrong technique would completely disappear. Thinking that he would soon be able to take off this mask which he had worn for hundreds of years, Taoist Taotia's face lit up with rare excitement. Senior brother, will definitely succeed. Old Antique nodded. Let's hope so. Let nature take its course. On the cliff, the two brothers unfurled the map and reconfirmed the village's coordinates. Taoist Taotai had paid an exorbitant price to buy this map from a map dealer. These map dealers traveled all over the world all year round, and had a lot of precious maps of secret realms. If they could buy a map before entering the secret realm, it would be a lot more convenient. At the very least, they wouldn't have to worry about getting lost in an unfamiliar place. The map of the gate between worlds was the treasure of the treasure map merchant, and it had a stable supply of updated maps. Although the gate between worlds had a 5-year time limit, there were always big shots who came out of the gate between worlds halfway through their journey, and the treasure map merchant would obtain information from these big shots about the updated maps. Of course, to buy such a map, one would need to spend a considerable amount of money. Such a price was not something an ordinary person could afford. The two of them had to work together to buy this map. In addition to the toll fee to enter the gate between worlds, the two of them had spent almost all of their savings. If the two epic-ranked assassins in the world of assassins were already in such a state, what about the others? Staring at the map, Taoist Taotai felt like his heart was bleeding. Senior brother, if we don't find the demon world holy water this time, won't we suffer a huge loss? Old Antique, if we can't find a map, we'll travel around the gate between worlds, draw a new map, and sell it as a map update pack. Taoist Taotai, there was such a thing? After confirming the coordinates of the village, the two of them immediately set off. The spiritual energy in the gate between worlds was extremely thin, so it was impossible to absorb the spiritual energy and convert it into spiritual energy. Here, they could only prepare enough pills to replenish their spiritual energy in order to maintain continuous consumption. If there was a situation where the supply of spiritual energy was insufficient, it would be very dangerous. So if they wanted to carry out a short-term operation in the gate between worlds, the smartest way was to get things done quickly. But this time, the two of them had prepared enough pills. Given their consumption, as long as they controlled their consumption along the way, they would be able to sustain themselves for about 3 months in the gate between worlds. The reason why they had made so many preparations was for the sake of obtaining the demon world holy water. The two of them were resolute in this regard. The coordinates on the map were very precise, and they followed the map until they finally found that remote village. According to the map dealer's description, this village had actually only been formed a few years ago. Furthermore, the village heads were 2 human cultivators who had mistakenly entered the gate between worlds. They had survived by relying on the demon world holy water that was abundant in the village, and in the end, they had simply put down roots here and built a village. When they reached the village entrance, Old Antique and Taoist Taotai couldn't help but stop. The scene in front of them made them frown deeply. Because the spirit energy in this village was abnormally thick. The spiritual energy in the gate between worlds was very thin, but the spiritual energy contained in this village was like a 100-fold spirit gathering array. Just walking to the entrance of the village made one feel relaxed and happy. In a world with thin spiritual energy, the existence of this village was like an oasis in the desert, which made one feel refreshed. Not only that, Old Antique also saw that there were a lot of spirit herbs and trees planted in the village. These species needed a pure environment to grow smoothly, and were very demanding on the environment. There was no way they could survive in a world like the gate between worlds, which was filled with demon chi. How did they do it? Senior brother, look, Taoist Taotai stretched out a finger and used spirit energy to condense a bit of demon chi in the air on his finger, which then turned into a purple spirit light that hovered at his fingertip. The moment Taoist Taotai put his finger into the village, the demon chi actually disintegrated in an instant. Taoist Taotai concluded, it looks like the spirit energy in this village is so thick that it has already formed a natural barrier, and the demon chi from the gate between worlds can't penetrate here at all. Furthermore, this village doesn't even have to worry about demon beasts. Demon beasts need to use demon chi to find prey, but this village has cut off the demon chi, so demon beasts can't get here at all. Saying this, both of them had indescribably delighted expressions on their faces. It looked like this was a paradise that could only exist inside the gate between worlds. As they were thinking this, they suddenly saw a villager carrying a wicker basket walk out of the village. A human cultivator? The man was also startled when he saw Old Antique and Taoist Taotai, but he didn't show any fear. Seeing that the two of them didn't respond, the villager became anxious instead. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and come in, it's easy for demon beasts to sense you standing outside. Saying this, the villager pointed to a stone tablet at the village entrance. Do you see this stone? This is the dividing line. Startled, the two of them hurried into the village in perfect unison, as if they had rehearsed it. The villager couldn't help laughing. Are you here for holy water? The two of them were startled again, then Old Antique nodded. Yes. It was obvious that the villager was already used to this, and he sighed. You're not the first to come here for holy water, but the fact that you were able to find our village proves that you have some skill. In order to get the holy water, you have to meet the village chief, who is currently busy. Would you like to come to my house? Taoist Taotai, is that convenient? The villager smiled. Of course it's convenient. After all, you're also customers. The village chief said that customers are God. As they followed the villager forward, many villagers gave them hospitable looks along the way. Old Antique asked, how many people are there in the village? Not many, it hasn't been long since it was built. The first members were cultivators who were trapped in the gate between worlds and couldn't get out. Then, the village chief was the first to discover the use of holy water, and they set up their own village, the villager said. Taoist Taotai, then what do you usually do? The villager thought for a moment before replying, it's very leisurely. We plant melons and grass, and our main business is selling holy water, and occasionally we scrape socialist wool. Old Antique. Chapter 363. This villager's house wasn't far away, it was only 3 or 4 li away from the village entrance. Along the way, Old Antique and Taoist Taotai saw the entire village. As the villager had said, there weren't many villagers here, and most of the cultivators had very low cultivations. Old Antique speculated that these were cultivators who had mistakenly entered the gate between worlds back then. This completely matched up with what the villager had said earlier. Every time the gate between worlds appeared, the windstorm it created when it landed and opened would always suck in a large number of innocent cultivators in the vicinity. Based on previous records, the number of cultivators who had been swallowed up by the gate between worlds alone was in the hundreds of thousands. And the cultivators in this village were obviously among those who had survived. So, how desperate must these low-level cultivators have felt when they had been sucked into this place back then? Old Antique sighed endlessly in his heart as he gazed at the beautiful scenery in the village. This was probably what it meant to have a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. As the two fellow brothers approached the tile-roofed house, they instantly sensed the strong spirit power lingering outside. They were astonished again. This was clearly made of fairly ordinary materials. But the level of spirit power it contained was really too exaggerated. Just as they were about to say something, they saw this enthusiastic villager standing at the door with a warm and hospitable smile on his face. I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Tiger Lee, a first-generation resident of this village. This is my home now. Under the mask, Taoist Taotai had a look of realization on his face. It turned out that he was a first-generation resident. No wonder he knew so much about the village's history. Your house is clearly made of very ordinary materials, but it's abnormally high in spirit power. Does this also have something to do with the holy water? Old Antique asked. Tiger Lee nodded without hesitation. Yes. Our entire village's building materials are very ordinary, and almost all of them are locally sourced. The bricks and tiles are all fired on the spot. As for why there's such a high concentration of spirit power, it's because we added holy water to the bricks and tiles when we made them. Sure enough, it was like that, Old Antique and Taoist Taotai sighed in their hearts. Come in and sit down, sir. Tigerly smiled as he welcomed them in. After entering, he immediately poured 2 bowls of water and gave them to them. This is holy water, please have some. Old Antique and Taoist Taotai were startled. You're giving it to us just like that? Aren't we waiting for the village head to come back? Tigerly smiled. This little bit of holy water actually isn't very useful. It can at most quench our thirst and replenish our spirit energy. Since you've taken such a huge risk to come to our village, you must have a huge demand. Large quantities of holy water has to be approved by the village head himself. I see, actually, every household has a reserve of holy water. At the beginning of every month, the village chief will send a few buckets to every villager's house. Tigerly, in, Lees, Tigers, T the water, T, Li, Taoist, T, Li, Tiger, K Li, and T, Li, T, all of them lowered their heads and gulped down the bowl of holy water without any hesitation. Antiquely, sweet, the tea, he did not feel much when the holy water entered his mouth, but when the holy water completely entered his body, all his fatigue was swept away in an instant. The 2 of them stretched out their hands and found that their palms were glowing with spiritual light. It was a phenomenon of spiritual power being replenished and overflowing. How magical! Both of them sighed. This bowl of holy water was even more effective than elixirs that could replenish one's spiritual power. Composing himself, Old Antique continued to ask, You said earlier that we weren't the only ones who had come to ask for holy water? Did anyone else come here? Not bad. Tigerly nodded. Moreover, most of the people who come to ask for the holy water have an unspeakable ailment and want to rely on the power of the holy water to cure them. Holy water does have a miraculous effect on difficult-to-treat illnesses, but it still needs to be judged according to the patient's condition. What do you mean? Old Antique asked. Tigerly pointed at the bowl on the table. As you can see, although holy water is magical, a bowl of holy water doesn't have much effect. It was necessary to determine the amount of holy water needed according to the severity of the illness or symptoms. Only the village chief and deputy village chief can do this. So there's such a saying. The 2 brothers were enlightened. Sirs, your origins are not simple. Judging from my personal experience, the amount of holy water you need must be huge. Tigerly smiled. Old Antique raised an eyebrow. Why do you say so? When the 2 sirs arrived at the village entrance, they were calm and composed. If it wasn't for their supreme realms, it would have been difficult for them to take even a single step through the gate between worlds. Tigerly analyzed, furthermore, the 2 sirs were very clear that they were heading straight for our village. They must have bought a map from a map dealer, otherwise finding our village under normal circumstances would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. To be able to afford a map of the gate between worlds, I don't even need to think to guess how powerful the 2 sirs are. I'm sure that in the cultivation circle in the outside world, you're big shots who can make people tremble with just your name alone. Old Antique and Taoist Taotai were startled when they heard this. Unexpectedly, Tigerly had hit the nail on the head. Speaking up to this point, Tigerly rubbed his head. Perhaps the 2 sirs are very curious as to why I know so much about the map dealer, because it was actually the village chief who sold the map to the map dealer. Old Antique, Taoist Taotai, although the gate between worlds has a 5-year time limit in the outside world, there are indeed a lot of uncertain small openings inside. As long as you can find them, they can spit people out. Tigerly said, previously, when someone wanted to leave the gate between worlds, the village chief drew a map of the village's coordinates and an explanation of the holy water. He entrusted that person to take it out with him. Who would have thought that not long after the advertisement was put out, the 2 seniors would actually come knocking on our door? Old Antique, Taoist Taotai, Old Antique, then, little brother, when will the village chief be back? Tigerly looked out the window and did some mental calculations. He should be back soon. At this time every day, the village chief receives the holy water. The holy water doesn't come out continuously, but at a fixed time each day at the source. Old Antique and Taoist Taotai both nodded. At that moment, Tiger Li, who was looking out the window, had a serious expression on his face. Suddenly, he said, "The village chief is back." Old Antique looked out the window, and sure enough, he saw a man carrying a shoulder pole walking over unhurriedly from a distance. Seeing that the man was about to pass the gate, Tiger Li warned them in a low voice, "When you ask about the holy water later, you mustn't ask whether the village chief has drunk it or not. That's taboo." "Why?" Taoist Taotai was curious. Tiger Li's expression tightened. "Because the village chief has never drunk it, ah?" Both fellow brothers were startled. Chapter 364. The village chief looked very young and his cultivation wasn't high. After a rough assessment, the two brothers immediately knew that he was at the peak late golden core stage. "Village chief, a senior has come to buy holy water." Tiger Li waved at the village chief at the door. The village chief immediately trotted over with a shoulder pole on his shoulder. There were two heavy wooden buckets in front and behind the pole, and both Old Antique and Taoist Taotai were very familiar with the aura in the buckets, so they were sure that they contained holy water. "I never thought that someone would actually come specially to buy holy water." Seeing Old Antique and Taoist Taotai, the village chief couldn't help smiling. "Come with me." Then, the village head picked up his shoulder pole again. After casually instructing Tiger Li to go help the deputy village head, he headed back to his house. Old Antique and the other man followed closely behind, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the village head's house. Standing in front of the village chief's door, the two brothers' lips twitched again. This was actually a small villa full of a modern atmosphere, which was completely out of place with the rest of the village's decor. Furthermore, the spirit power inside was very weak, much weaker than at Tiger Li's house. The most important thing was that this villa actually had modern furniture, a fridge, a TV, a washing machine, a microwave. "What's your name?" "My name is Huang Sheng." "You can call me Village Chief Huang." "Deputy Village Chief Jiang Huang Wan." "We were the ones who discovered the holy water back then." Speaking up to this point, Village Chief Huang's face was full of pride. "I exchanged the holy water for the building materials and furniture of this villa." "Exchange?" "Although the two of you are extremely powerful, it seems that you don't know much about the structure of the demon world inside the gate between worlds. Of course, there are places in the demon world that are down and out, but there are also bustling cities that aren't inferior to those of us human cultivators in the outside world. The furniture here was exchanged with me by some demon kings." Village Chief Huang smiled and said, "Holy water is something that even demon monarchs would fight for. Not only does it work on humans, it also works on demons. According to our human ranking system, demon kings are at least at the soul formation stage. As a golden core cultivator, aren't you afraid?" Taoist Taotai couldn't help asking. "Demon monarchs aside, even demon immortals are unable to set foot in our village because of the holy water spring. This is a paradise isolated from the gate between worlds. Although the village is a little small, it's actually quite prosperous because of the holy water." Village Chief Huang leaned back on the sofa and said calmly, "Seniors, please take a seat." The two brothers couldn't help but twitch the corners of their mouths. It was very obvious that this was the attitude of people who had seen the world. Village Chief Huang might have even made deals with demon gods, let alone demon kings. Otherwise, how could a golden core cultivator remain so calm in the face of two itinerant immortals like them? It really didn't make sense. "Our strength is not on the same level. You're just at the golden core stage. Aren't you afraid that we'll take the holy water by force?" Taoist Taotai stared at the calm village chief Huang as he asked. "You can't do anything to me." Village Chief Huang waved his hand confidently. "The power of the holy water radiates to every corner of this village. Not only can it isolate demon chi, it can also isolate evil intentions. Those with evil intentions won't be able to enter our village. If the two of you really have evil intentions, no matter how high your realms are, you'll immediately turn into stone statues. When Tiger Li brought the two of you into the village, you should have seen that stone steel, right? Village Chief Huang smiled. It was a demon king who harbored evil intentions and tried to sneak into our village to steal the holy water. In the end, it was directly petrified by the power of the holy water. I made it into a stone steel and placed it at the entrance of the village as a dividing line from the outside world. There are many more stone steels like this one around the village. Hearing this, the two brothers couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. Although this was only a one-sided account from Village Chief Huang, they didn't sense that he was lying. The two of you have come from afar to specifically come to our village in search of the holy water. May I know what kind of unmentionable illness you have? Village Chief Huang got right to the point. After thinking for a while, the two brothers felt that there was nothing to hide. When all was said and done, this was just an exchange of what each of them needed. Because we cultivated the wrong cultivation technique back then, my junior brother was disfigured, while I became quite fat. My movements aren't as nimble as before, and I'm very slow," said Old Antique. Village Chief Huang nodded, and when he looked at the mask Taoist Tao Tai was wearing, he suddenly understood. I understand. Because the two of you cultivated the wrong cultivation technique, your bodies are suffering from some side effects. It's very simple, each of you will get 2 buckets of holy water. Take it orally and apply it externally, and you'll be healed in a few days. Will it really work? Taoist Tao Tai was a little excited. It definitely will. Village Chief Huang nodded with certainty. You can stay in our village for treatment before you go out. Each of you will get 2 buckets of holy water. The slightly fatter senior will get 1 bucket for drinking. The other bucket will be mixed with water to soak in for 3 days in a row. The senior wearing the mask will also get 1 bucket for drinking, and the other will be mixed with water to make a face mask. After applying it for 3 days in a row, he'll be completely healed. Saying this, Village Chief Huang took a deep breath, then looked at Old Antique and Taoist Tao Tai with great interest as he narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly. So, what will the two of you give me in exchange? 3 days later, the two brothers were finally cured of the hidden ailment that had plagued them for 100 years after cultivating the wrong cultivation technique. Taoist Tao Tai finally took off his mask and breathed in fresh air, his heart filled with excitement and joy. At the village gate, Village Chief Huang and Tiger Li saw them off. Seniors, have a safe journey. Looking at Old Antique, who was still slightly plump, Village Chief Huang couldn't help asking with a smile, since seniors have already regained their original size, why do you still appear in this form? Old Antique couldn't help laughing. People are already used to seeing me like this. I still have to think about other people. This time, I really have to thank you, Village Chief. Village Chief Huang waved his hand and solemnly cupped his fists in salute. Seniors, you're too kind. You used a lot of elixirs to exchange for the holy water, and that was an equivalent exchange. This transaction is very meaningful. The two brothers cupped their fists in salute. Very well. Village Chief Huang, we'll take our leave here. Have a safe journey, seniors. At the village gate, Village Chief Huang and Tiger Li watched the two of them leave. Tiger Li, Village Chief, Deputy Village Chief just said that the holy water spring doesn't seem to be producing any more water. Village Chief Huang nodded. Don't panic, it'll probably be soon. Chapter 365. It was July 4th on Tuesday in the 11th week of the semester. The Shuego sect incident had come to an end for the time being, and the centuries-old enmity between the two senior brothers had finally been resolved. Old Antique couldn't run away from offering incense at Black Gauze's grave. Thus, on the day the incident ended, Old Antique applied for a whole week's leave from school. He had used up his annual leave, and the number 60 high students complained incessantly about it. They couldn't gossip, and couldn't secretly do their homework in Old Antique's history class. Later, Wang Ling learned from Killer Taoist that the main members of Shuego sect this time were actually former subordinates of Killer Taoist's Cheongqi sect. These old cadres revered Taoist very much, and were the type who would come at a call and leave at a call. Their ultimate goal in turning the whole of Songhai City upside down was nothing more than to force old Antique to show himself. Of course, the entire plan hadn't actually gone so smoothly. For example, the fire on June 29 was actually caused by a Cheongchi sect cadre who had suddenly gone berserk while trying out a spirit fruit. At that time, the spirit fruit had still been in its first testing phase, and its effect hadn't actually been stable. The spirit fruit now was the second version which Taoist Taotai had carefully refined. The second version had improved safety features. Even a foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't immediately go berserk after taking it, and there was also a corresponding antidote to ensure their safety. But in order to force old Antique to show himself in the end, Taoist Taotai had simply put on a complete show. He had personally set up the so-called spirit power storage array, although Wang Ling and Fang Xing had secretly dismantled it later on. In the end, this matter became an unsolved mystery of this matter. A perfectly good array disappearing at the drop of a hat was as frightening as having a sister-in-law, or a younger brother. Of course, the whole thing seemed like an illusion which Taoist Taotai had meticulously planned out, but there was one thing that was true. That was Shuego's sex hierarchy: whoever looked ugly could be a cadre. This was a rule which Shirlaji had set down back then after Taoist Taotia's face was disfigured, and hadn't been changed to this day. After the whole thing was over, some people were naturally happy, while others were sad. On the top floor of the office building in the heart of Songhai City, the lord of the castle stared at the masked Taoist Taotai on the sofa with an unsightly expression on his face. Next to the lord, the lady also lowered her head in silence and didn't dare speak at all. "Senior, you are breaking the agreement." The castle lord's eyes were very deep. He was so angry that he couldn't even drink his favorite milk. Taoist Taotai waved his hand very naturally. "No, this isn't a breach of contract. I just unilaterally rejected the follow-up cooperation. As for gorgeous itinerant's trump card, I've already found it for you." The lord of the castle's expression turned for the better. "Really, senior?" Taoist Taotai nodded. "I've already ordered someone to send it to your phone." With that, Taoist Taotai got up to leave, but before he left, he glanced at the lord of the castle. "Your luck seems to have always been pretty good. You haven't offended any enemies who would want to buy your lives. But here, I still want to give you a piece of advice. Sometimes, it's wise to quit while you're ahead. If you continue to persist on the wrong path, you'll only sink deeper and deeper." It was clear that this was a warning. The lord of the castle smiled. "Many thanks for the kind reminder, senior. This junior knows his limits in this world." As soon as he said this, Taoist Taotai turned around and directly turned into nothingness, as if his body had dissolved into the air. Following Taoist Taotia's disappearance, the heavy and austere air in the air was instantly swept away, and the lady breathed a sigh of relief. "Lord, Taoist Taotai has severed his cooperation with us. What should we do in the future? It's a small matter." The lord of the castle shrugged and said, "In terms of raw strength, we can't compare to a mortal mansion. In terms of scale, we can't compare to the Gua Pai army. But our Moa mortal castle also has its own characteristics, which is that we have a very powerful intelligence network. If we can make good use of this intelligence network, we should be able to exchange it for a lot of good resources. If we lose our backer, we can always find another." Speaking up to this point, the lord of the castle raised an eyebrow and continued, "Furthermore, it's not like we came away empty-handed this time." "The lady, are you talking about gorgeous itinerant's trump card? But, is that reliable? What kind of trump card can be transmitted through a phone?" The lord of the castle narrowed his eyes. "Maybe it's a virus program?" In the world of killers, there are many well-known killers who are proficient in this type of virus invasion. By implanting viruses in magic treasures, they can cause them to malfunction. The lord of the castle turned on his phone curiously. Sure enough, as Taoist Taotai had said, he had received an anonymous email. But the content wasn't a virus program as he had imagined, but a flash picture which would self-destruct 3 seconds after it was opened. The lord of the castle opened the flash picture and was completely stunned. It was actually a picture of gorgeous itinerant topless. At that moment, the lord of the castle instantly understood what gorgeous itinerant's trump card was referring to. This is... The lady was curious and was about to lean her head over. The lord of the castle turned off his phone at lightning speed. Blood gushed out of his nose like a fountain and flowed down his beard. The lady, Lord, you, the lord of the castle, children shouldn't look at this. The lady, when Wang Ling arrived at school that morning, he found that a lot of people were missing. Superchin wasn't here, Dopigwa wasn't here, and even Little Peanut wasn't here. Because of the spirit seal, all the students who had taken the fruit would need some time to recuperate and recover. This made Teacher Pan look like she had suffered a great deal early in the morning. Seeing that the midterm exams were coming up, Teacher Pan had originally planned to do a sudden revision for the Tao Talismans class, but because of the Shuego sect incident, her revision plan had been delayed. Furthermore, because a lot of people were missing, she couldn't collect today's homework, so that morning, Grade 1, Class 3 was particularly quiet. There was no ridicule from Super Chin, no agreement from Little Peanut, and no gossip from Dopigwa. Bored to death, Wang Ling sat in class for a while, when a familiar figure suddenly appeared at the door. It was Teacher Yi Han, who taught PE. Teacher Yi came to the door and knocked. He was still dressed in his sportswear and was holding a blue notebook in his hand. Teacher Pan? Teacher Pan was marking exam papers. When she looked up and saw Teacher Yi, she was very curious. Old Yi, why are you here? Have you also learned how to steal lessons? Teacher Yi, when the few students in the class heard this, they secretly cast resentful looks at Teacher Pan. This was a classic case of bullying an honest person. Teacher Yi, it's like this, I signed student Wang Ling up for the running event in our number 60 high school sports meet, but there are some things I need to explain, so I need to hold a small meeting. Oh, I see. Teacher Pan looked at Wang Ling. Come back quickly. I have to write down the Tao Talismans in 5 minutes. If you can't make it, come back to my office and repeat it. Wang Ling. Chapter 366. Wang Ling followed Teacher Yi to the PE teaching and research room on the 3rd floor of the teaching building. This classroom had been specially set up for the PE teachers at number 60 high school so that the students would have a place to go when the weather wasn't good and they couldn't do outdoor activities. The PE teachers could use this classroom to explain in detail the PE assessment plan for the semester to the students, as well as explain all kinds of tricks to control magic treasures and flying swords in passing. That was because magic treasures and flying swords were currently part of the PE teaching branch. Unfortunately, whenever it rained, the PE class was practically monopolized by the teachers of the various subjects. This PE teaching and research room existed only in name. Except for the PE exam at the beginning and end of the semester, the teachers of the other subjects wouldn't deliberately fight over it. Usually, this classroom wasn't used at all. Most people nowadays knew about the cultivation education system that high school was the most important period to grasp cultivation theory, while university was the place to study magic treasures and flying swords. Thus, it could be said that they didn't attach much importance to PE. When all was said and done, it was because of the system and the school system. When Wang Ling entered the class, he saw 2 people sitting alone in the classroom. One was Fang Xing, and the other was Jiang Bai, the son of Jiang Haifu, the head of Kitchen Knife sect, whom Father Wang had befriended some time ago. Although Jiang Bai had been assigned to a regular class for the entrance test back then, he wasn't completely useless. Teacher Yi had discovered that he had some talent in sports. So this time, Jiang Bai would be representing number 60 high school in the school sports meet as the main force in the spirit archery shooting event. Wang Ling hadn't expected Jiang Bai, who was usually gentle and weak, as if a gust of wind could topple him over, to be astonishingly talented in this area. However, the evaluation criteria for the spirit archery competition were indeed a little different from those in sports such as sword riding, jogging, and sword control. Instead of strength and endurance, the most important thing was accuracy. Apart from that, the ability to capture motion was also required, as well as some predictive skills. It was almost impossible to train these things in a short period of time. What was needed was some talent and a foundation of training over a long period of time. The reason why Jiang Bai was so accomplished was that his father Jiang Haifu had taught him to practice flying kitchen knives since he was young. Jiang Haifu often forced Jiang Bai to train by using live targets. Jiang Bai was timid and didn't dare disobey his father, so he had been forced to learn. Seeing Wang Ling enter the classroom, Fang Xing immediately smiled and greeted him. "Yo! Classmate Wang Ling." "Good morning." With an expressionless face, Wang Ling found a seat in the back and sat down. In the end, as soon as he sat down, Fang Xing also stood up and pulled Jiang Bai to sit on either side of Wang Ling. Wang Ling? Teacher Yi didn't understand what was going on. Fang Xing grinned. "The classroom is big and there aren't many people, so it's very cold. We're huddling together for warmth." Wang Ling rolled his eyes silently. Although the weather in Songhai City was extremely unstable, it was almost summer. Who was he kidding when he said it was cold? Moreover, with your level of cultivation, how could you be so easily cold? However, Wang Ling realized that this wasn't the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem was, why had this Jiang Bai also sat down? Sensing Wang Ling's puzzled gaze, Jiang Bai scratched his head and said weakly, "Hello. Classmate Wang Ling, I'm Jiang Bai. Last time, my dad said that he wanted to be friends with you." Wang Ling. This time, Wang Ling understood that this Jiang Bai was suffering from daddy syndrome, and was the kind of person who did whatever his dad told him to do. At that moment, Teacher Yi said from the dais, "Originally, there were 16 students attending this meeting, but because of the Shuego sect incident, only the 3 of you are here. But that's fine. After all, everyone here is the main force of our number 60 high school sports team. We'll just have a simple meeting here this time. I'll have classmate Fang Xing briefly convey the spirit of the meeting to the students who aren't here." Speaking up to this point, Teacher Yi paused before continuing. "This time, our opponents are outstanding students from the other high schools in Peiyuan district. In addition to our old rival number 59 high school, there's also Reliance High School. The district sports meet this time is a large-scale sports meet jointly organized by our 3 schools. It's mainly aimed at freshmen who have just started school. Our events this time are as follows: a 10,000-meter relay jog with a sword, a 1,000-meter sprint with a sword, spirit arrow shooting, medicine ball throwing, 10-person tug-of-war, and the final event, the Battle of Soul Pets." Teacher Yi looked helplessly at the blueprint in his hand. "I originally wanted to concentrate on training, but now I realize that it's already too late. Classmate Fang Xing has already signed up for all the events, and classmate Jiang Bai is fully in charge of the spirit sword shooting event." For some reason, when he heard this, Wang Ling suddenly had a bad feeling. Classmate Wang Ling has only signed up for a 10,000-meter relay jog with a tearful smile on his face. Teacher Yi smiled tearfully. "How about you sign up for 2 more? Wang Ling could see that Teacher Yi was truly helpless. The Shuego sect incident this time had really had a huge impact. In the eyes of many outsiders, it would be as difficult as reaching the sky for number 60 high school to win the district sports meet this time. Although a person could recover in 3 to 5 days after their spirit was sealed, there would still be a lingering weakening effect. The limit of a peak late foundation establishment cultivator's strength was around 1,000 gene, but if they were in a lingering weakening state after their spirit was sealed, their strength would be greatly reduced by at least 50%. Of course, this was just an analogy. After all, a lot of freshmen hadn't reached late foundation establishment yet. Wang Ling cupped his chin in thought. Among all the senior grade 1 freshmen, apart from Fang Xing, this monster, and his adorable self, only Super Chen and Lotus Sun were among the strongest. But the current situation was that Super Chen hadn't recovered yet, and Teacher Yi wasn't in charge of the women's sports event that Lotus Sun was participating in. That was very awkward. Staring at Wang Ling, Teacher Yi said very seriously, "Student Wang Ling, it's good that you choose one more event, medicine ball throwing or a 10-person tug-of-war, choose one of the 2. If there aren't enough participants, it's the same as giving up." Also, our opponents this time aren't simple, especially those 3 new students from Reliance High School, who are really strong. This is a rare opportunity to learn from each other. Even if we lose, we'll still learn a lot. Jiang Bai was curious. Teacher Yi, do you have information on these 3 students? Teacher Yi, I'm still collecting detailed information, but I know their names. They're the famous 3 brothers of the tree family. One is called Iron Tree, one is Copper Tree, and the last is Aluminum Tree. Seeing Teacher Ye's sincere attitude, Wang Ling felt that it really wouldn't be good for him to refuse. After all, Teacher Yi was usually the one who was bullied the most at school. Wang Ling couldn't bring himself to do it. In the end, Wang Ling still chose 2 more events. One was medicine ball throwing, and the other was a battle of soul pets. The spirit beasts participating in the battle of soul pets were kept in captivity by the teachers and students of each school. Suitable spirit beasts had to be selected through an audition, and number 60 high school currently had a particularly suitable selection. Back then, it was Fang Xing who had dragged Wang Ling into this. Now, Wang Ling wanted to drag Loopy Toad down as well. Chapter 367. Under normal circumstances, in foundation building high schools nowadays, the first year was to study concepts and theories, the second year was to study some techniques, and the third year was to study theories and techniques. Overall, it was no different from how they used to study in the past. Theory focused on doing a sea of questions, and technique focused on repetitive practice. For most people, the nightmare began in their third year of high school. Of course, in comparison, Wang Ling felt that he had it easier. After all, he could immediately remember whatever he saw. The 2 gremlins, eraser and pen, also helped him with the writing. The only troublesome part was the exam. Moreover, his exam results couldn't be too good, but Wang Ling felt that what university he would eventually get into and what grades he would get were 2 completely different things. Since entering number 60 high school, Wang Ling had realized that he was full of surprises. What university he would ultimately get into would depend on the heavens. When Teacher Yi saw Wang Ling tick Battle of Soul Pets, he instantly understood. He almost instantly thought of Loopy Toad. It could be said that Teacher Yi had a very deep impression of this dog. Especially that green dog fur, it was unforgettable. Student Wang Ling, I remember that your class got a spirit dog before the start of the semester, right? You want him to participate in the competition? Teacher Yi asked as he looked at Wang Ling. Wang Ling nodded. Teacher Yi, although you can indeed sign up, each school can only bring 1 spirit pet to participate in the battle. We still have to go through the selection next week. Teacher Yi, don't worry, Loopy Toad will definitely be fine, Fang Xing said with a smile on his face. Then let's talk about it after we bring it to the selection next week. Teacher Yi nodded. To be honest, Teacher Yi actually didn't have high hopes for Loopy Toad. Although he had heard that Loopy Toad had been a demon king in the past, its soul had already been extremely weak when it had been discovered. Teacher Pan had then captured its soul and forcibly fused it with an Akita that only had a skeleton left. For a demon king, the moment he fused with the dog, his life had already ended miserably. Moreover, the cultivation of the demon clan required the help of demon chi. Without knowing how to cultivate spiritual power, it was impossible for them to improve their realm in a short period of time. Hence, Teacher Yi had some doubts about Loopy Toad's strength. He had no idea what kind of player Loopy Toad had become after Wang Ling's careful training. That afternoon, when school was almost over, Teacher Yi once again summoned up his courage to face Teacher Pan and poached Wang Ling away in the last class. When Wang Ling reached the classroom door, Teacher Pan called out to him. Wang Ling, wait. Wang Ling turned his head with a puzzled expression. Teacher Pan said earnestly, although you're participating on behalf of the school in this competition, you still have to be careful. However, I still hope that after the competition ends, you will be able to retract your heart as soon as possible. Wang Ling. Teacher Pan, do you know why your grades are always in the middle, neither up nor down? I feel that it's because you didn't put in the effort to study properly. That's all I have to say. The rest is up to you. Wang Ling was speechless. His results were neither good nor bad, so who had provoked him? How nice would it be to be neither up nor down? When he arrived at the sports field, he noticed that it was especially noisy today. A bunch of people had gathered in front of him for some reason, and the sound of all kinds of laughter rose and fell. It was very lively. It was time for the regular class's PE class, and the class was about to end, so the PE teacher simply gave the regular classes their own free time. Then, a group of people came to watch Jiang Bai's archery practice. Wang Ling moved closer to take a look. All the boys and girls around him were focused on Jiang Bai on the shooting range. Standing at the very front, Teacher Yi tossed a round disc into the air. Then, Jiang Bai raised his bow, and the arrow in his hand directly pierced through the air. With a bang, the round disc was smashed to pieces. Everyone's faces were indescribably shocked. Wow! I didn't expect Jiang Bai to have this kind of skill. This is too awesome. The PE teachers from the other classes on the side also applauded. Teacher Yi has found a pretty good seedling. It looks like our number 60 high school has a chance of winning an award in the archery event this year. In the field, Teacher Yi smiled embarrassedly and handed a black cloth to Jiang Bai. Only now did everyone realize that the real show had just begun. Someone cried out in surprise. Jiang Bai covered his eyes. He was actually shooting blind. In the crowd, Wang Ling also raised his eyebrows with great interest. He hadn't expected Jiang Bai to actually have some skill. It went without saying how difficult it was to shoot blind, but it wasn't impossible. Ordinary people could actually do it through a lot of training, relying on their ears to determine the direction of the wind, and relying on some experience and touch. It was even simpler for cultivators. Apart from relying on the above, they could also flexibly use their spiritual senses to capture a target. But this was still difficult for most students. Can he succeed? A lot of people held their breaths as they watched this scene. Get ready to start. Teacher Yi took a breath, then jogged off into the distance and abruptly tossed out the round disc. Whoosh! Everyone heard the sound of the wind as the disc spun. Jiang Bai pricked up his ears to listen, and then in a split second, he seized the opportunity to raise his longbow and abruptly shoot. Bang! He hit the target in one shot. 666. Jiang Bai is really awesome. A boy couldn't help cheering. However, Teacher Ye's brow gradually furrowed. Looking at the various branches of the archery competition, it could be said that Jiang Bai's current performance in fixed-point shooting, moving aiming, and moving blind shooting could be said to be pretty stable. But Jiang Bai still had some weaknesses, and that was fixed-point shooting. A few weeks ago, Teacher Yi had specially strengthened Jiang Bai's training in this area, but in the end, he hadn't made any progress at all. What's going on? Why does old Yi look a little unhappy? A PE teacher who didn't understand the situation asked in a low voice. A female PE teacher standing on the side answered in a whisper, "You don't know. Jiang Bai is a little special. Although he has a foundation in shooting, student Jiang's shooting was forced by his father to use live targets when he was very young. It's fine if he's just shooting at targets and moving targets, but it's difficult if he has something tied to the target." What do you mean? Just watch. Wang Ling heard the conversation between the two PE teachers from a distance, and then looked at the middle of the field. Teacher Yi had tied an apple to the center of the bullseye, and then stepped forward to pat Jiang Bai on the shoulder. Standing next to him, she said, "Relax a little, look carefully, the target is just an apple, it's not a living thing. You have to have a little confidence in yourself." Jiang Bai nodded solemnly. Then, under everyone's gazes, Jiang Bai raised the bow and arrow in his hand, his aura clearly a lot more chaotic than before. Xiao xiao xiao, xiao xiao xiao. Then, he shot 6 spirit arrows in a row. Teacher Yi dropped his forehead deeply into his hand, and the other students and teachers who were watching were also dumbstruck. Because, a total of 6 spiritual arrows, all perfectly circled around the apple, and not a single arrow actually hit the apple. Wang Ling, this was probably the legendary body contour master. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.